Have you ever wondered about ancient artifacts that defy time? Welcome to Unearthed Secrets, uncovering the hidden stories behind history's most mysterious relics. Please subscribe and like. Tell us where you're watching from and the time it is there, and let's begin. The coin that refused to fade. It begins with the soft clink of metal, not a sound sharp enough to awaken, but one that lingers like a memory carried in the stillness of night. A coin, small enough to rest in the palm of a hand, yet vast enough to hold centuries within its surface. Silver, though dulled by time, bears markings that even erosion could not erase. Its story is not of brilliance alone, nor of wealth in the way we imagine it, but of endurance, of a currency that moved not only through markets, but through the veins of empires, binding together lands and lives that might otherwise have remained apart. The Abbasid Caliphate, stretching wide across the Middle East and beyond, once pulsed with the circulation of silver dirhams. They were not mere tools of exchange, they were symbols of connection. When minted, each coin carried with it not only a weight of silver, but also a weight of trust, faith, and recognition that the hand holding it belonged to a world larger than itself. To hold a dirham was to touch the authority of the caliph, to be tethered to an empire whose influence reached from the deserts of Arabia to the rivers of Mesopotamia and beyond to the mountains, coasts, and markets that made up the fabric of Islamic civilization. This particular coin, unearthed in Iraq, whispers of Baghdad, the beating heart of the Abbasid world. Imagine the city not as the dusty ruin we know today, but as a thriving jewel, alive with voices speaking a dozen languages, the scent of spices wafting from stalls, the shuffle of scholars in courtyards debating the mysteries of science, philosophy, and faith. A coin minted here was more than currency, it was a signature of Baghdad's spirit, a fragment of an empire that prized knowledge as much as power. When you trace your eyes across the faint inscriptions still carved into the dirham, you find the Arabic script flowing like the Tigris itself, graceful, assured, eternal. The words often carried verses from the Quran, reminders of faith wrapped into every transaction. On one side, the declaration of God's oneness, etched with such clarity that even centuries later, one feels the precision of the die cutter's hand. On the other, the name of the caliph, anchoring the coin in its political moment, stamping the weight of authority into the silver. To spend this coin was to encounter both heaven and earth at once, to exchange not only silver, but also meaning. Silver itself held a special role in the Abbasid economy. Gold was rarer, tied to the grandeur of empire, but silver was the lifeblood that carried trade across continents. Merchants crossing from Central Asia to the Mediterranean might not share a tongue, yet a silver dirham in hand became a language they all understood. From the bazaars of Samarkand to the ports of Basra, from the caravanserais on dusty routes to the stalls where silk, glass, and paper changed hands, the dirham's presence stitched together a sprawling world. And yet, the survival of this coin, this single piece of struck silver, is something beyond mere chance. For how many thousands upon thousands were minted, exchanged, worn down, melted, lost? This one endured. Perhaps it was dropped in haste along a street in Baghdad, sliding into a crack between stones where it rested unseen. Perhaps it was buried intentionally, part of a hoard hidden in fear during some unrest, meant to be retrieved later but never found until centuries passed. Or perhaps it traveled, carried in a pouch across deserts and seas, until finally exhausted from its journey, it slipped quietly into the earth. Archaeologists uncover coins like this, and at first see only small metal discs. But closer inspection reveals a map, a network of invisible lines, showing how goods and ideas traveled. For the Abbasids were not only conquerors and rulers, but also patrons of trade, learning, and art. The silver dirham flowed as freely as knowledge itself, and in some ways, the two cannot be separated. Just as books translated in Baghdad's fabled House of Wisdom carried Greek philosophy, Indian mathematics, and Persian science into Arabic, so too did the dirham carry value across frontiers. Both were vessels, both bore imprints of civilizations, and both have outlived their makers. Consider the texture of the coin. Hold it in your imagination. Cool metal, slightly uneven at the edges, for each coin bore the marks of the human hand that struck it. It was no perfect machine-made circle, it was an object alive with irregularities, each curve and indentation whispering of its moment of creation. The hammer fell, the die pressed, and with a single strike, meaning was forged into silver. That instant echoes still, across centuries, through this fragment that refuses to fade. The Abbasid era was not without turmoil. Dynasties rise and fall, and power shifts as swiftly as desert winds. Caliphs who minted coins in their name sometimes reigned only briefly, their names disappearing from chronicles, remembered solely in silver. Some dirhams even became testimonies to rival claims, with overstrikes blotting out earlier inscriptions, as if authority could be rewritten by force of metal. The survival of these altered coins tells us that even power is fragile, but silver silent, enduring silver remains. Now imagine the coin not only as an object, but as a witness. It lay quiet through centuries of upheaval, the Mongol invasions that reduced Baghdad to ashes, the shifting sands of empire, the rise of other dynasties and other economies. Through it all, this coin endured underground, away from human hands, keeping its story intact. When finally brought to light, it emerged not as a dull piece of metal, but as a relic of continuity. It whispers still, though softly, telling us of an empire where trade was a river of silver, and where faith and economy mingled on every surface of minted coins. Coins like this also remind us of the human scale within empire. For while we imagine caliphs and rulers, it was ordinary people who touched the dirham most often. A farmer in the countryside, selling grain at market, a craftsman exchanging his work for bread, a mother buying cloth for her child, all of them held the coin, felt its weight, and in that moment were joined to the vast machinery of empire. In their daily exchanges, empire was not distant. It was a silver disc passed from hand to hand, proof of belonging to a larger world, and in this way, the dirham is not only history but humanity. It does not fade because it was never just about silver. It was about people, their hopes, their fears, their trust in the value carried within that small piece of metal. Even now, when it rests behind glass in a museum, or in the careful hands of a scholar, it still carries that human echo. This is why the coin refuses to fade. Not because silver is indestructible, it tarnishes, it wears, it bends, but because meaning, once struck into metal, becomes memory. And memory, like silver, endures. So when you picture the Abbasid dirham, do not see it only as treasure, see it as language. See it as a bridge of trust. See it as a silent witness that, though buried for centuries, has not lost its voice. The coin still speaks, softly, to anyone willing to listen, and in that whisper we are reminded that history is not gone. It only waits, patient beneath the surface, refusing to fade. The mask that held back dawn begins in silence, before the first light touches the horizon, in the long shadowed hours when night still clings to the earth. The Haida people, whose home stretches across the islands and coasts of the Pacific Northwest, lived in a world where dawn was never simply the rising of the sun. It was a story, a negotiation between darkness and light, and at the heart of those stories, carved from cedar, by hands that remembered both tradition and imagination, there was the mask. The mask, circular and radiant, yet fixed in wood, was not simply decoration. It was not even just an object for ceremony. It was, in a very real way, a threshold. A face of the sun itself, contained in cedar, painted with pigments drawn from earth and ochre, adorned with copper or abalone shell, so that it shimmered as if dawn itself had been caught and held there. To wear it was to become the border between night and morning, to stand at the edge of two worlds. When you look at the mask today, resting quietly behind glass, perhaps in a museum far removed from the cedar forests of Haida Gwaii, you may see only curves and colors, shapes radiating outward like sunbeams. But to the Haida, every line had weight, every symbol, a pulse. The protruding rays, carved or painted, spoke of light reaching outward. The central face, solemn yet alive, was not merely wood, it was presence. It was the sun in its human form, a being whose moods and movements governed tides, seasons, and time itself. The Haida believed that masks were not lifeless, they were vessels. When carved, they became bodies for spirit beings, each with their own voice and will. The sun mask was one of the most powerful of these, for it was not just a spirit of the forest or sea, but the great cycle of light itself. To place it upon one's face in ceremony was not a costume, but a transformation. The wearer became dawn, held in human form, the very turning of the sky embodied. Imagine, then, the scene in a longhouse at midwinter. The night stretched endlessly, darkness lingering longer than light. Inside the house, cedar beams creaked with the warmth of the fire, and families gathered, waiting for the performance to begin. The carved mask, hidden until the right moment, was brought forth. Drums pounded slowly, like a heartbeat waiting to quicken. And then the dancer appeared, the sun mask covering their face, the light of the fire catching the painted rays. The mask did not smile. It did not frown. Its expression was eternal, a reminder that dawn was not to be taken for granted. The Haida knew the stories of the trickster raven, who once stole the sun and released it into the sky, ensuring that light would return each day. But the memory of darkness remained. The mask embodied this fragile balance, that light had to be carried, preserved, and guarded, lest the world fall back into endless night. What makes the mask extraordinary is not only its symbolism but its survival. Cedar, though strong, is not eternal. Wood decays, pigments fade, traditions fracture under the weight of time and colonization. And yet, pieces of these masks endure, some still bearing their brilliant colors, others weathered to softness. They are testaments not only to Haida artistry, but to resilience, the refusal of a culture to let its light be extinguished. To run your eyes across the mask's surface is to feel texture layered with meaning. The smoothness of polished wood meets the raised edges of carved rays. Traces of red ochre cling to grooves, recalling the blood of the earth itself. Bits of shimmering shell catch the light, a reminder that dawn was not only warmth but reflection, glinting off ocean waves. These materials were not chosen for beauty alone, but for balance, earth, sea, and sky, bound into one face. In Haida stories, the sun is not merely a celestial body, but a being who interacts with the world, sometimes generous, sometimes stern. It is a figure of both order and change. To hold back dawn was to pause that cycle, to create a moment where the world could exist between night and morning. And that is what the mask offered, a ritualized suspension of time. When the dancer wore it, when the drums beat, when the fire's light flickered against its rays, the dawn itself seemed to hesitate, caught between worlds, held back for just a breath longer. Such masks also carried authority. They were not everyday objects. They belonged to lineages, to clans, to hereditary chiefs who held the right to use them in ceremony. To wear the sun mask was to carry responsibility. It was to embody not only a story, but a lineage of ancestors who had guarded that story for generations. In its gaze, you see not only the sun, but the memory of all who had once danced its light into being. Even now, centuries later, when some of these masks rest far from their home, their presence remains powerful. Visitors often describe a feeling, a hush, when standing before them. The mask does not need movement or ceremony to retain its force. It holds dawn, even in silence, a quiet defiance against the erosion of time. And so, the mask that held back dawn endures as more than wood, more than paint, more than artifact. It endures as a reminder that light is a gift, that darkness is never far, and that in the hands of those who carve, who dance, who remember, dawn can be paused, even if only for a heartbeat. The mask waits, its gaze fixed beyond centuries, whispering to all who stand before it, light can be held, but never owned. It can be delayed, but never denied. And in that balance lies the story of both dawn and humanity itself. The throne that slept beneath sand. It begins with the weight of stone, pressed not only by the hands of its carvers but by centuries of drifting desert sand. Somewhere along the Nile, where kings raised their monuments to the sky and spoke to eternity through temples and pyramids, a throne of granite once stood in its rightful place. It was not a chair as we know chairs. It was not meant for comfort, nor for rest. It was a symbol, a center of power, a seat that bound heaven and earth together. It was the throne of a pharaoh, and for ages it slept beneath the sand, hidden from the eyes of those who once bowed before it. To picture it, you must step back into the halls of Egypt's golden age. The throne gleamed not in gold or silver, but in the hard permanence of granite, cut from quarries where the echoes of chisels rang out for days without end. Each block dragged, each surface polished, each edge shaped with tools that seemed too simple for the scale of the task. Yet the Egyptians did not carve carelessly, they carved with purpose, each mark an echo of belief, each groove a whisper of devotion. The throne was not only a seat, but a declaration, a monument in miniature, carrying the weight of eternity within its stone frame. Granite, heavy and unyielding, was chosen for reasons beyond durability. To the Egyptians, stone carried life force, it anchored divine presence. Temples and statues were carved not simply to survive, but to embody the eternal. And so, when a pharaoh took their place upon this granite throne, they were not sitting as a man or woman. They were sitting as Horus incarnate, the living God upon earth, whose authority extended beyond mortal boundaries. The throne was the gateway through which human flesh became divine rule. Imagine the throne's first unveiling, when it was lifted into the halls of a palace, whose walls bore painted scenes of triumph and plenty. Torches flickered against the polished stone, drawing shadows that seemed to bend in reverence. Courtiers bowed low, servants hurried quietly, and priests murmured prayers as the pharaoh approached. The granite was cool to the touch, smooth yet humming with unseen force. To ascend those steps and take that seat was to perform a ritual as old as Egypt itself, the joining of ruler and cosmos. Upon its surface were inscriptions, hieroglyphs that glimmered in pigment, carvings of lotus and papyrus, of falcon and cobra. Each symbol bound the throne to the land it governed, from Upper to Lower Egypt, from riverbank to desert. The pharaoh seated there was no longer one man or woman, but the embodiment of both order and balance, the keeper of Ma'at. To sit upon the throne was to become the axis around which Egypt revolved. But time does not bow, even to stone. The granite throne, so solid, so immovable, became vulnerable to what Egypt knew best, the shifting sands. Dynasties fell, palaces crumbled, armies came, and armies left. Some thrones were moved, others shattered. Yet this one, through fortune or neglect, was swallowed by desert. Its polished face dulled, its hieroglyphs worn by wind, its steps buried until it was no more than a lump beneath dunes. Where once it held the weight of a god-king, it now held silence. And so it slept. Seasons passed, centuries stretched, and new rulers rose over a land whose memory was long. The granite remained, invisible, enduring, as the Nile continued its cycles and the people carved new monuments, forgetting the seat hidden just beneath their feet. For the throne, time was not destruction. Time was a blanket. Each layer of sand was another veil, another silence. It was as if the pharaoh's power still lingered, too strong to vanish, yet too sacred to be seen. When eventually fragments were found, unearthed in the dry breath of excavation, it was as though the throne exhaled after millennia of holding its breath. Archaeologists brushed away grains of sand from carved lines, still sharp, hieroglyphs still whispering the same prayers once sung in incense-filled halls. The granite, despite centuries of burial, retained its presence. Cold, dark, and immovable, it seemed to remember the weight it once bore. What stories does such a throne keep? Perhaps it remembers coronations, when priests placed crowns upon a young ruler's head and the granite trembled with chants. Perhaps it remembers decrees spoken in voices that resonated against stone walls, decisions that changed the fate of kingdoms. Perhaps it remembers moments of solitude, when the pharaoh sat in silence, feeling the enormity of what it meant to be divine, yet human still. The Egyptians knew that objects were not lifeless. They believed statues could breathe, that thrones could hold power, that amulets could protect the soul. The throne was not a tool, but a companion of kingship. When buried, it did not lose its purpose. It only slept, waiting to be remembered, waiting to speak again. Even now, as scholars debate its origin, its exact owner, its placement in palace or temple, the throne resists certainty. Like the pharaohs it once held, it exists between history and myth. Its granite speaks of labor and craft. Yet its aura speaks of something beyond stone, a reminder that kingship was not an office, but a divine role, tied as much to eternity as to earth. Stand before such a throne, and you feel the heaviness not only of granite, but of centuries pressing down. You feel the silence of all who once bowed before it, the weight of a people who believed their ruler held the sky itself in balance. And in that silence the throne seems alive still, holding dawn and dusk, life and death, power and fragility within its carved form. It is called the throne that slept beneath sand because that is what it did. It lay in darkness, forgotten, while empires rose and fell around it. But when unearthed, it returned not as ruin, but as memory, an anchor to a time when stone was made sacred and the seat of a king was carved as eternal as the gods themselves. And so it endures, patient, unmoved, carrying in its weight a truth that no sand can bury. Power is fleeting, but stone remembers. The pharaohs may be gone, their voices long silenced, yet the throne remains, whispering still beneath the desert winds. The pendant that whispered to gods. It begins with silence. Not the silence of emptiness, but the deep, layered hush that only ancient ground knows. Beneath the dust of Mesopotamia, under centuries of shifting sand, rivers that once flooded and receded, and cities that rose and fell, something glimmered faintly in the earth. A pendant, no larger than a palm, delicate yet powerful, fashioned from hammered gold by hands that belonged to a world almost 5,000 years gone. The place was Ur, one of the oldest cities humanity ever built. Its great ziggurat had once towered above the flat horizon, a staircase for priests to ascend toward the gods. In its streets, cattle were driven, reeds were cut from the Euphrates, and merchants carried lapis lazuli from Afghanistan, copper from Oman, and cedar from Lebanon. But beneath the noise of markets and the cries of animals, there were tombs, deep royal chambers carved into the earth, where rulers and priests were laid to rest with treasures to accompany them into the afterlife. It was here, hidden away in one of those chambers, that the pendant slept. The pendant was unlike ordinary jewelry. Its surface was hammered so thin it seemed to glow with its own light, a disk of sun caught in metal. Around its edges, small incised marks traced patterns of spirals and waves, symbols of water and air, elements Mesopotamians believed were governed by the gods. At its center was a tiny perforation, a hole through which a cord once passed, perhaps to hang it around a priest's neck, or to suspend it before a statue in a temple. It was not wealth alone that defined this ornament, but function. It was a mediator, a tool, a bridge between human and divine. Archaeologists who uncovered it in the royal cemetery of Ur spoke of the stillness of that chamber. Skulls of attendants lay around the tombs, suggesting rituals of sacrifice. Lyres decorated with bulls' heads, weapons inlaid with precious stones, and vessels of gold surrounded the dead. But this pendant stood apart. Its smallness was deceptive, for in Mesopotamian thought, gold was not merely valuable, it was eternal. Gold did not tarnish, it did not corrode, it defied time. It was the closest substance to divinity that humans could shape with their hands. And so, a pendant of gold was more than ornament, it was a voice. They called it the Whisperer. To clasp it was to hold a channel, through which offerings might travel. Priests in Ur's temples would chant as they touched it, calling on Nana, the moon god, or on Inanna, goddess of love and war, or on Enlil, master of winds. Their words, carried on breath, were thought to enter the pendant, to be magnified, to echo in realms unseen. And when the pendant hung in darkness, it was said to hum faintly, not in sound but in a vibration that only gods could hear. Imagine a scene: the ziggurat rising, the courtyard filled with oil lamps, the scent of burning cedar wood curling upward. A priest, draped in wool, lifts the pendant against the night sky. Stars shimmer above the flat plain, the twin rivers stretch like silver in the dark, and he murmurs prayers, for crops, for floods, for victory, for fertility. To the crowd gathered below, he appears almost suspended, his words threading heaven and earth. The pendant, small as it is, seems to absorb everything, storing it within the permanence of gold. Thousands of years passed, the city of Ur fell to dust. Its bricks melted into the soil, its ziggurat collapsed, and the rivers shifted their courses. Yet beneath, the pendant endured, and when modern archaeologists brushed away the soil and held it up to the sun once more, its surface gleamed as though no time had touched it, a disk of eternity. But what did it whisper? That is the question that haunts anyone who looks upon it. Was it prayers of kings who longed for immortal names? Was it the cries of mothers asking gods to spare their children? Was it the chants of armies who demanded victory before battle? We cannot know, for the pendant speaks no words we can record, yet its very survival is itself a voice. Gold carries memory differently than stone. Stone wears down, inscriptions are lost, but gold shines back at us, almost unchanged. To see this pendant today is to stand in the same glow its maker once saw, to feel the same weight in the palm that a priest once felt. It collapses distance, the millennia fall away, and for a moment one feels Ur not as ruin, but as living city, its bustle, its cries, its prayers. And yet, with every artifact comes a shadow, for the pendant was not placed lightly in that tomb. It was part of rituals steeped in sacrifice. Attendants who lay beside their rulers may not have gone willingly. Gold was a voice, but it was also a chain. The gods demanded gifts, and those gifts could be as costly as human lives. The pendant whispers both reverence and silence, both devotion and blood. Consider also the fragility of what it meant. In a city where floods could wipe out fields, where enemies marched with spears, where disease swept through huts, the pendant was more than decoration. It was a fragile lifeline, an attempt to make sense of forces beyond control. To whisper into it was to hope, to beg, to believe that gold could bend the ear of gods. And now, when one gazes at it behind museum glass, the whisper has changed. It no longer speaks to gods of Mesopotamia, but to us. It asks, what do you place your faith in? What amulets do you carry? What objects do you hold? What tokens do you believe will protect you from the unknown? The pendant, for all its age, reflects something eternal in human nature, the need to reach beyond ourselves, to believe in the power of objects to connect us with forces unseen. Perhaps that is why we feel uneasy, as well as awed. For if this pendant truly whispered to gods, then it still whispers, not in a language we understand, but in the simple fact of its being. A small circle of gold, hammered 5 millennia ago, outlasting empires, waiting beneath earth, and now resting in our gaze. It is not silent, it never was. It carries the voices of Ur, it carries the weight of offerings, it carries the hum of prayers too old to name. And as you look upon it, as you imagine its glow in the firelit temples of Mesopotamia, you might find that it whispers to you too. The tablet that bound the sea. It begins with fire. Not the great roaring flames of temples or the controlled hearths of a palace, but the sudden, consuming blaze that devoured a kingdom. Somewhere in the palace of Pylos, on the southwestern coast of Greece, flames licked at cedar beams, collapsed walls, and turned painted plaster into ash. It was a destruction that should have erased all memory of that place. And yet, within the inferno, something was preserved. Clay tablets, dozens of them, inscribed in the strange, blocky symbols of a script that would one day be called Linear B. Unlike parchment, unlike wax, clay was fragile until it was touched by fire. The palace scribes who wrote them never intended these records to last forever. They were short-term notations, inventories of oil, grain, bronze, and sacrifices owed to gods. Clay was pressed with a stylus, dried in air, then stored until no longer needed. Most of these temporary records would have dissolved back into dust. But when fire swept the palace, the heat baked them hard, locking words into permanence. Among those tablets, in a palace chamber of Palos, there was one whose meaning stretched far beyond accountancy. Its mark spoke not of simple trade, but of the sea itself. The people of Palos lived by the edge of that sea, the Ionian waters where ships could vanish beyond the horizon, where storms rose without warning, where the unknown waited beyond sight. To them the sea was not merely water, it was a power, restless and alive, a force that fed and destroyed in equal measure. And so when scribes recorded offerings, when they listed who owed what to which god, they sometimes named the sea itself as though it were a being, a deity demanding tribute. The tablet is small, no larger than a hand. Its surface is coarse, browned by the fire that hardened it. The script etched into it is almost geometric, wedges and lines pressed into wet clay, 3,000 years ago. Yet when read, it says something extraordinary, that offerings were made not just to Poseidon, not just to gods of sky or land, but to the sea itself, as though the sea could be bound by words, appeased by sacrifice, held in check by the promises of men. Imagine the scene. The palace of Pylos stood tall on a ridge above the coast. Its halls were painted with dolphins leaping through waves, chariots rushing across plains, spirals that seemed to echo the endless currents of water. Inside, scribes bent over wooden desks, reeds in hand, pressing into clay the names of men, the tally of sheep, the amounts of oil. But on this tablet, one scribe paused, dipped his stylus again, and carefully wrote the signs that bound the sea. Not metaphor, not poetry, an administrative record, yet one charged with ritual weight. For the Mycenaeans, ancestors of Homer's heroes, the sea was both pathway and prison. It brought copper from Cyprus, tin from distant lands, ivory from Africa, but it also brought raiders, storms, and destruction. To bind it in writing was to grasp at control, and that is what makes the tablet extraordinary. It is not only evidence of language, nor of bureaucracy. It is evidence of fear. Fear that the sea, if unbound, would rise. Fear that words and offerings were the only chains men could forge strong enough to hold back water. The palace burned, the kingdom of Pylos fell, but the tablet remained, and in its silence it whispers, "We feared the sea, and we tried to bind it." For centuries, no one could read it. When archaeologists uncovered it, along with hundreds of others, its script was still a mystery. Linear B had been found before at Knossos in Crete, but its meaning was locked away. Scholars puzzled over it for decades. Only in the mid-20th century did Michael Ventris finally unlock its code, proving that Linear B was an early form of Greek. And when that happened, tablets like the one from Pylos spoke again, after 3,000 years of silence. They told us of a palace bureaucracy as complex as any kingdom, of scribes recording offerings with the precision of accountants, of gods named and unnamed receiving gifts of honey, oil, animals, even humans. And they told us that the sea was counted among those gods. But what does it mean to bind the sea with writing? Is it belief? Is it desperation? Is it simply metaphor? A scribe's flourish? Or was there truly, in that palace, the conviction that clay pressed with signs could restrain a force as vast as the Ionian waves? The fire that destroyed Pylos should have erased its words. Instead, it fixed them forever. And so the sea was bound, not by priests, not by kings, but by accident, by flame, by the fragile endurance of clay. The tablet rests now in quiet halls, far from Pylos, far from the sea it once sought to bind. Its lines remain sharp, its words still legible. And in them, one can hear the echo of a world where writing was new, where gods were near, and where men believed they could whisper into clay and hold back the endless tide. But that is only half the story. For to understand the power of this tablet, one must walk deeper into the world of Pylos, into the lives of those who inscribed it, into the rituals that surrounded it, into the collapse that buried it. The sea was not bound once, it was bound again and again, in ritual, in offering, in fear. And to follow those bindings is to follow the thread of how a civilization tried to hold back the very element that sustained and threatened it. The fire burned everything, but it also revealed truths the living never meant to share. The palace of Pylos collapsed in flame around 1200 BCE, at the edge of what historians would later call the Bronze Age collapse. Entire kingdoms fell, trade routes shattered, palaces crumbled. The people who had ruled from those halls were gone, their voices silent, but in the ash, their tablets endured. Among them, that single clay fragment about the sea. It is easy to look at it now, framed behind glass, its wedges neatly transliterated, its meaning translated, and think of it as a curiosity. But for the scribes of Pylos, that line of script was not curiosity, it was a lifeline. To them, the sea was both memory and omen. Consider the world they lived in, fields of grain rippling under sun, sheep crowding pastures, olive trees twisting on dry hillsides. The palace ruled it all, its administrators recording who gave what to whom, how many jars of oil went to what temple, how many goats were owed in sacrifice. And beyond those hills, stretching like a restless boundary, was the sea. It gave life. It brought ships laden with copper, the lifeblood of bronze. It brought tin from lands so distant their names were myths. It brought traders and their wealth. Without the sea, Pylos could not be rich. Without the sea, the palaces of the Mycenaean world would have been no more than hill forts. And yet, the sea destroyed. Storms could strip ships to pieces. Raiders could sweep from horizon to shore in hours. Tales of people called the Sea Peoples spread in whispers, invaders who struck coasts and toppled kingdoms. To the scribes who pressed marks into clay, the sea was an untamed god, too large to name, too near to ignore. That is why the tablet matters. The words carved into its clay were not poetry. They were administrative. They listed offerings, honey, oil, animals, some to Poseidon, some to gods now forgotten, some directly to the sea. It was as though the scribes were accountants of eternity, tallying debts not only to men, but to forces that could drown them. Think of the ritual. Imagine the palace courtyard, its columns painted bright red, its floors polished with lime plaster. At its center, a great hearth glowed, smoke curling toward the open sky. Priests, or perhaps officials, for in Mycenaean palaces the two often blended, brought forward offerings, honey in golden jars, sheep led on ropes, amphorae filled with oil. Some offerings were placed before statues, the gods with faces of men and beasts. Others were carried toward the shore, down to the edge where waves lapped rock. There, words were spoken, words lost to us, but pressed faintly into clay. The sea was invoked. The sea was promised honey. The sea was promised oil. The sea was bound by offerings, bound by bargains. But can the sea ever be bound? That question lingered in the minds of archaeologists when the tablet was first deciphered. Was it metaphor? Was it the name of a god, later forgotten? Or was it truly the sea itself, the endless water, addressed as though it were listening? The Mycenaeans lived at a threshold. They were not the poetic Greeks of Homer yet, not the philosophers of Athens, not the dramatists of later centuries. Their world was one of palaces and warriors, ships and bronze. Their gods were rawer, closer to the earth, more dangerous, and their writing, Linear B, was not for literature. It was for records, for administration. The only reason we know of their offerings is because fire hardened clay. So when they wrote to the sea, it was not imagination. It was fear turned into numbers. A world trying to control chaos by accounting for it. The fire at Pylos preserved these fears. The flames that destroyed the palace also baked its words. Without destruction, we would never know what they feared most. Centuries later, Homer would sing of Poseidon, Earthshaker, Lord of the Sea, who sent storms and earthquakes alike. Was this the same sea the tablet bound? Was the god of Homer a memory of an older, nameless force once appeased in Pylos? We cannot say. But the line is there, pressed into clay. Honey to the sea, oil to the sea bound by gifts. And yet, as the palace burned, as scribes dropped their styluses and fled, as roof beams cracked and walls fell, the sea they feared surged closer than ever. For the Mycenaean world itself collapsed. Palaces at Knossos, Mycenae, Tiryns and Pylos all fell. Trade routes ended. Scripts like Linear B vanished for centuries. The binding failed. The sea was not held. Still, the words endured. That is the paradox of this tablet. It failed in its purpose. It did not save Pylos. It did not keep the kingdom safe from destruction. It did not hold back the waves of change. But it succeeded in another way. It kept alive the voice of its people. It let them speak across millennia. It made their fear eternal. Today the tablet sits in a museum, silent. Visitors pass by it, reading its label. Linear B tablet, Pylos, 13th century BCE. They may not linger. It is small, unimpressive at first glance. Just clay, just lines. But look closer. Every mark is the hand of a man long dead, his reed stylus pressing into wet clay. Every mark is his attempt to make order out of the sea. And there, in that silence, is the whisper of a world lost. A world that thought writing could bind the sea. Perhaps it did. Not in the way they intended, but in another way. The sea remains unbound in water, but in story, in memory, in history, it is bound forever by clay. And so we return to the fire, to the moment when the palace of Pylos became ash, to the heat that turned temporary notations into immortal voices, to the tablet that bound the sea, bound it not in reality, but in words, bound it not for its people, but for us. 3,000 years later, we can still read their fear, we can still hear their hope, and we can still wonder if in some way the sea was listening. The drum that dreamed of battles. The drum is silent now. Its wooden body rests under glass, its stretched skin cracked with age, its voice hushed after centuries. But once, long ago, it was no mere instrument. It was a messenger, a herald, a companion of kings, a witness to war. This was not a drum that simply marked rhythm or filled the air with music. It was a drum that spoke, and when it spoke, it carried the weight of nations. The Ashanti people of West Africa knew the talking drum as more than wood and hide. It was a voice, its carved hourglass shape, its cords pulled taut, its head of animal skin stretched firm. All of it was designed to mimic the tones and rhythms of human speech. Struck with a curved stick, Its sounds could echo words, repeat phrases, sing names. In a land where messages traveled not by letter but by sound, the talking drum was a lifeline of empire. But among these drums, there were some said to be more than tools. There were drums believed to dream, drums that remembered battles, even when no hand struck them, drums that whispered the names of kings in the silence of night, and of those one stood above the rest, the drum that dreamed of battles. Its story begins in the heart of the Ashanti Empire, in Ghana, in the centuries when the golden stool held the spirit of the nation, and kings commanded armies that stretched far beyond forest and plain. The empire thrived on gold, on trade, on unity, bound by tradition and belief. But it was also an empire of warriors, and warriors needed a voice. The drum was that voice. Imagine a morning in Kumasi, the capital of the Ashanti. The palace stands with walls of mud plastered smooth, its courtyards wide, its halls filled with the scent of kola nut and palm oil. Warriors gather, their spears gleaming, their muskets polished, their cloaks dyed with indigo and crimson. At the center, a drummer raises the talking drum. He tucks it under his arm, adjusts the chords with his elbow, and strikes. The sound leaps into the air, not a beat, but a phrase. It is the name of the king. Again the drum speaks, announcing the king's titles, his deeds, his ancestors. The warriors cheer, not because of music, but because the drum has spoken. This was the power of the talking drum, to make words fly farther than a shout, to make names echo where no voice could reach. And so, when war came, the drum was not left behind. It marched at the head of armies, carried on the shoulder of drummers who knew the sacred codes. It spoke commands over the noise of battle: advance, retreat, encircle, hold. To enemies, it was a sound of terror. To allies, it was clarity in chaos. But this particular drum, the one said to dream of battles, was more than a tool. Legend says it was carved from a tree struck by lightning. Its wood carried the fire of the sky. The skin stretched across it was taken from the hide of a lion, an animal revered for strength and courage. From the day it was made, it was destined for greatness. The first time it spoke was not in ceremony but in war. The Ashanti faced an enemy at the edge of their land, raiders who threatened their villages. The king ordered his warriors to march, and at their head the drum was carried. When it sounded, its voice was unlike any other. It did not merely repeat the commands of the drummer. It seemed to surge with life, to echo deeper, to carry farther. Warriors swore they heard it call their names, urging them forward. They fought with fury, their steps guided by rhythm and word alike. When the battle ended, the raiders were scattered, and the Ashanti stood victorious. From then on, the drum was kept as more than an instrument. It was given a place of honor in the palace, beside the golden stool itself. Only the most trusted drummers could strike it. Only the bravest warriors marched with it, and always, it was treated with reverence, as though it were alive. Generations passed, and the drum endured. It spoke at coronations, announcing new kings to their people. It spoke at funerals, mourning the dead with phrases of praise. It spoke in council, relaying messages across villages, binding the empire together. But most of all, it spoke in war. The Ashanti fought many battles, for power, for land, for survival, and always, the drum was there. Warriors said that when night fell, if you stood near the palace, you could hear it murmur in the dark, not struck by hand, but whispering still, low, steady, like distant thunder. Some said it dreamed, others said it remembered. What does it mean for a drum to dream? Perhaps it means that memory lives in wood and skin, that the echoes of battles linger even after silence. Perhaps it means that the stories of men are held by the tools they carry. Or perhaps it was more. Perhaps the Ashanti were right, and the drum truly was alive, its spirit bound to the struggles of its people. The colonists who came to West Africa in later centuries dismissed such tales. To them it was only wood, only skin, only craft. They saw its skill. Yes, they marveled at how it carried messages across miles, but they did not hear its dreams. They could not. Yet even they feared its voice. When wars broke out between the Ashanti and the British, the talking drums were banned. Colonial authorities feared their messages, their power to rally, their ability to summon warriors with sound alone. Drummers were silenced, instruments were seized, the dream of the drum was forced into sleep. But legends do not die so easily. The drum that dreamed of battles survived. Some say it was hidden, carried away from Kumasi before the British sacked the palace. Some say it was buried in the earth, its voice muted by soil but not broken. Others claim it traveled, carried in secret, passed down among drummers who whispered its story. Wherever it went, its silence grew heavy. It had once spoken of kings and war, of honor and command. Now it waited, unstruck, its dreams its only companion, and yet, even in silence, it carried weight. For when archaeologists and historians finally uncovered it, when it was cleaned and placed behind glass, the people who gazed upon it did not see wood and skin alone. They saw history, they saw memory, they saw a voice that had once commanded nations. Stand before it, and you may feel it too. the shape of its body, curved like the waist of a human, the cords once pulled tight by the elbow of a drummer, the skin, still stretched though cracked with time. It is as though it waits, and if you listen closely, perhaps you will hear it, not with your ears, but with the weight in your chest, the shiver in your spine, the echo of a drum that once dreamed of battles. Part 2 will tell what happened when its silence broke, when it spoke one last time, not with sound but with the force of memory. For the drum did not end with empire, it endures. Even now, in story, in rhythm, in dream, the rain had softened to a steady patter by the time the old drum was carried into the clearing. Its hide glistened faintly in the firelight, and its wooden body, darkened with age, smoothed by countless hands, seemed almost to pulse as if it held its own rhythm, waiting for the right moment to speak again. The elders sat close, their backs curved like bent bows, their voices hushed as if they feared waking something that lingered in the air. Children pressed at the edges of the gathering, their wide eyes fixed not on the fire, but on the drum itself, as though it might move on its own. To continue its story is to understand that the drum was never silent, not truly. Even when untouched, even when hidden away in shrines or locked within dusty storage rooms, it carried the memory of every beat it had ever given. Each strike was not only a note, not only a message, but a step in a dance across generations, binding one heartbeat to another, one century to the next. The Ashanti knew this, and so they treated their drums not as tools, but as companions, vessels of voices that did not die when a man or woman passed from the earth. The talking drum was called by many names, some formal, some affectionate. Its form allowed it to mimic the tonal rise and fall of human speech. A practiced drummer could call out messages across hills and rivers, messages that seemed almost like whispers carried by the wind. But this drum, the one remembered, the one still spoken of as if it rests in waiting, was said to go further. It did not only carry the words of the living, it was said to echo those who had gone before, those whose names were spoken in the ancestral prayers, those who had fought and fallen, those who had guided and ruled. The night after the battle at Fayez, when the Ashanti Confederacy rose and secured its dominance, the drum was struck in triumph. But when the drummers ended their role, a strange rhythm continued in the silence. It was faint, like rain on distant leaves, but those who heard swore that it carried the cadence of warriors whose bones lay unburied. The elders said the drum had dreamed the battle even before it began, and in its dreaming it summoned the echoes of those who had fallen elsewhere, long ago, to lend strength to the arms of the living. From that moment onward, the drum was not merely a herald of war or peace, it became a witness. It was brought out at coronations, where new rulers placed their hands upon it, not only to feel the polished wood, but to sense the weight of responsibility it carried. They said that if a ruler placed his palm and listened closely, he might hear more than the beating of the heart within his own chest. He might hear counsel, or warning, or the soft exhalation of ancestors who judged silently from beyond. But there is another story, one whispered cautiously. It is said the drum once refused to speak. A ruler eager to prove his greatness, commanded the drummers to announce his glory from one end of the kingdom to the other. Yet when the stick struck, no sound came. Again and again the hands fell, but only silence rose. The ruler grew furious, demanding explanation. An elder approached, bowed low, and told him plainly, "The drum recognizes not only the man but the spirit. You cannot force truth through hollow wood. If the drum does not answer, it is because the spirits will not speak for you." The ruler's reign ended not long after, for silence can be more condemning than sound. This silence was not death, however, for in time, when another placed their hand upon the hide with humility, the drum spoke again, its voice strong, carrying words over the hills. This tale endured as a reminder. The drum did not serve blindly. It demanded respect, not for itself, but for the power it embodied, the connection it maintained between earth and spirit, between today and yesterday. In its later years, as colonial forces pressed inland, the drum was carried in secret. To some it was too dangerous. Its voice could rally people, call them together in defiance, remind them that their strength was older than any foreign flag. To others, it was too precious to risk, for a relic such as this did not belong in the hands of strangers who would never understand the songs hidden within its skin, and so it disappeared from sight, passed from hand to hand, hidden beneath mats, buried in shallow earth, concealed as though it were only wood and hide, when in truth it was a living archive. The people whispered that even when hidden, the drum continued to dream. Travelers claimed to hear faint rolls echoing in the forests at night, even when no drummer sat nearby. The rhythm carried messages that no one could quite translate, yet they stirred emotions all the same: hope, sorrow, determination, reverence. It was said that the land itself beat in time with the drum, and that when rain fell heavy on the leaves, it was only the sky remembering its own part in the eternal song. And so the drum became more than artifact, more than heirloom. It became an idea, a presence that could not be silenced even when no hand touched it. Perhaps that is why today, long after its last known appearance, people still speak of it. In museums across the world, talking drums sit quietly behind glass, their voices locked away. But among the Ashanti, the memory of this particular drum is not bound by wood or hide or rope. It moves like breath through story, passed down in words, in rhythm, in the silent recognition that not every beat is meant to be heard, some are meant to be felt, deep within the chest, as if the heart itself were answering. So when we call this the drum that dreamed of battles, we mean more than the clash of spears or the cries of warriors. We mean the battle to remember, the struggle to keep voices alive when time tries to scatter them. We mean the war between forgetting and honoring, between silence and sound. Every strike upon the drum was a choice, to call the living, to recall the dead, to remind the land that it too listens. And if, in the quiet of night, you pause and strain your ears, you may hear it still, not as thunder, not as a marching roll, but as a steady, patient rhythm that lies beneath the ordinary sounds of the world. A rhythm that reminds you of footsteps on soil, of rain striking leaves, of hearts beating in unison across centuries. That is the legacy of the Ashanti drum, the one that dreamed, the one that remembers, the one that will not fade. For even in silence, the drum speaks, and even in darkness, it dreams. The cup that refused the feast. It begins not with the clamor of a feast, nor the spilling of wine across polished stone floors, but with silence. Imagine a chamber unearthed beneath layers of Cypriot soil, the air thick with centuries of stillness. Within that chamber lies a cup, its surface dulled by the passage of time, its form both ordinary and extraordinary. It waits. A vessel that once knew ritual, once touched lips, once carried something more than liquid, yet for reasons lost to history, it came to be remembered not as a cup that celebrated, but as a cup that refused the feast, refused the hand, refused the purpose for which it was shaped. To understand such refusal, we must step backward into the Bronze Age, when Cyprus was not the quiet island of later centuries, but a crossroads, a place where traders, sailors, and pilgrims met. The second millennium BCE was a world of exchanges, both material and spiritual. Copper drawn from the veins of the island flowed outward to distant lands, and in return came gold, ivory, ceramics, and stories. In this world, every object bore weight, every crafted vessel carried significance. A cup was never merely a cup, it was a participant in the drama of life and death, a bearer of meaning. Feasting was no trivial pastime. To gather at a table was to affirm order, to drink was to connect with ancestors and gods alike. The ritual cup stood at the center of this act. Lifted to lips, offered to the heavens, it transformed mere grain wine, or honeyed beer, into an offering. Yet this particular cup, fashioned with skill, shaped in the bronze twilight of its age, seems to tell a different story. It is as though it turned its face away from the table, refusing to be filled. A profound silence gathers around it, deeper than the quiet surrounding any other vessel of its time. When archaeologists discovered it, they catalogued its dimensions and traced the patterns incised upon its surface. Spirals, faint and worn, encircle its body. To some they resemble waves, echoes of the sea that carried Cyprus into contact with the wider world. To others they appear as coils, symbols of eternity, cycles without end. Yet none could ignore the placement of the cup. Unlike other vessels, it was not found at a banquet hall or within a domestic storehouse. It lay within a ritual pit, as though deliberately set aside, abandoned by human hands but claimed by silence. Silence, in the Bronze Age, was not absence. It was a presence of another kind. Silence marked the divine, the unspoken, the forbidden. A cup that did not serve could not simply be discarded. It had to be buried, hidden, woven into ritual soil. Thus the cup that refused the feast became a relic, not of abundance, but of denial. Picture, if you can, the feasting halls of Bronze Age Cyprus. Torches cast their light upon plastered walls. The air is thick with smoke, roasted meat, and the tang of fermenting drink. Musicians pluck strings while dancers move in slow, deliberate rhythms. Leaders recline upon low couches, hands resting upon vessels of bronze and clay. Servants pour, guests drink, and the cycle continues. Each cup raised affirms belonging. Each swallow draws the participants deeper into shared bond. Yet in some shadowed corner, perhaps placed upon an altar or shelf, sits this other cup, waiting, watching, but not joining. A vessel present at the feast but absent from its flow. Why? That is the question that stirs across the centuries. Why would a cup be made if not to be filled? Why would hands carve spirals into its body only to deny it the liquid that would complete its being? Some whisper of curses, others speak of vows. Perhaps it belonged to one who swore never to drink, one who bound themselves to silence in the midst of noise. Perhaps it was a vessel reserved for gods alone, too sacred for mortal lips. Or perhaps more haunting still, it was made to remind the living of hunger, of that which could not be satisfied. The Bronze Age was not an age of abundance without end. Droughts came, famine pressed close. Entire settlements rose and fell with the changing fortunes of rain and trade. In such times, a cup that refused might become a powerful symbol. It could embody absence itself, a warning that feasts are fragile, that fullness can vanish in a season. To set such a cup at the heart of ritual might have been a way to remember the cost of forgetting. To drink from every other vessel while leaving this one untouched might have been a way to acknowledge the shadow of want, even amid plenty. Yet the more we look upon it, the more its silence deepens. Archaeologists unearthed fragments of burnt offerings around it, charred grain, cracked bones, remnants of incense. These suggest that it was part of a ritual marking endings rather than beginnings. Perhaps it was lowered into the earth as part of a foundation deposit, a gift to whatever lay beneath. To bury a cup unused is to declare that some feasts must never begin, some offerings must remain unpoured. This is refusal elevated to ceremony. Cypriot myths tell of gods who dined with men and demanded their share of sacrifice. Aphrodite, born of sea foam along the island's coast, was honored with garlands and libations, yet she was also a goddess who withheld, who turned beauty into longing, who made desire an unending hunger. To place a cup at her altar and never fill it might have been a way of honoring that side of her power. To worship absence as much as presence, hunger as much as satisfaction. A cup that refused could become a mirror of the goddess herself, eternally near, yet never wholly given. Step closer to its surface. The spirals seem to shift in torchlight, edges blurring with time. Imagine the hand that carved them, the tool pressing into bronze or clay, tracing shapes older than writing. Spirals move inward, spirals move outward, they are paths without end. Perhaps they were meant to show that the cup's meaning did not lie in use but in contemplation. One did not drink from it, one looked upon it, and remembered the sea that gave and took, the cycles that raised and broke harvests, the gods who smiled one year and turned away the next. To us this silence may seem frustrating, to those who lived with it, it may have been liberating. Not all rituals are about action, some are about restraint. Not all offerings are given in abundance, some are withheld. The refusal of the cup may have been the truest offering of all. By refusing to pour, one acknowledged that some hungers cannot be satisfied, some desires must remain unmet, and life itself is bounded by limits. And so, standing before the cup, we confront its enduring mystery. Its body dulled, edges worn, yet its meaning intact. It has outlived the feasts, outlived the hands that might have raised it. It rests as a reminder that absence itself is powerful, that refusal can be as sacred as acceptance. In a world that celebrated abundance, this cup stood for the opposite, and by doing so, it became unforgettable. Every spiral, every layer of ash, every charred fragment around it whispers of lives long gone. The silence that enfolds it is the silence of voices no longer heard, yet still somehow present. Through centuries, through shifting sands and uncounted generations, the cup that refused the feast persists, as enigmatic as ever, inviting reflection, contemplation, and awe. The key that turned no lock. It begins in the quiet, sun-warmed ruins of ancient Greece, where stones have rested for centuries, whispering stories that only the patient ear can hear. Among the scattered fragments of temples and homes lies a small, unassuming object, a bronze key, tarnished by time, yet shaped with a precision that hints at careful craftsmanship and purpose long forgotten. At first glance, it appears ordinary, a simple loop at one end, a flat, intricate bit at the other, yet its existence raises questions that echo across millennia. This key, seemingly designed to open something, unlocks nothing in the world as we know it today. Yet its presence in the soil, buried beneath layers of history, suggests it once held immense significance, a silent witness to moments of human triumph and secrecy. Archaeologists first discovered the key, nestled within the remnants of a villa, near the outskirts of an ancient city, its walls etched with faded frescoes depicting gatherings, rituals, and celebrations. The villa itself seemed modest but well constructed, hinting at residents who held some status, yet preferred the privacy of secluded courtyards. Surrounding the key were fragments of clay vessels, shards that might have held olive oil, wine, or grains, evidence of daily life continuing in routine and quiet dignity. Yet among these mundane remnants, the bronze key stood out, a symbol of mystery in the midst of familiarity. Its design, unlike typical keys from the era, was elongated and adorned with subtle carvings resembling intertwining vines, leaves, and abstract geometric shapes. The craftsmanship suggested that this was not a key meant for mere doors, but rather for a chamber of knowledge, a secret compartment, or a ritual object that held more than just physical barriers. It held significance woven into the very fabric of those who created it. Scholars and enthusiasts have long debated the purpose of this key. Some argue that it belonged to a wealthy household, where it might have opened a treasury or a safe containing coins, jewelry, or precious scrolls. Others propose a more enigmatic origin. The key may have been symbolic, a ceremonial object meant to represent the threshold between the visible world and the spiritual or hidden one. In Greek culture, keys were often associated with Hecate, the goddess of crossroads, magic, and hidden knowledge. Could this key then have been a votive offering, a charm for protection, or a tool in rituals performed at dusk and dawn? Moments when the world seemed thin and permeable, when the living could, perhaps, reach beyond into the mysteries that the gods themselves guarded. Its silent endurance in the soil suggests that it was buried deliberately, a conscious act to protect or conceal it, rather than an accidental loss. Closer examination reveals tiny inscriptions etched along the shaft, worn almost entirely smooth by centuries of handling and burial. These inscriptions are not letters in any known alphabet, but resemble symbols, flowing lines, and angular signs that some have likened to coded language or a personal cipher. Attempts to decipher them have yielded multiple interpretations. Some see a map, others see prayers or invocations, while a few see abstract representations of astronomical observations, perhaps marking solstices, equinoxes, or the positions of celestial bodies that guided the lives of those who walked these lands. The key, therefore, is more than a tool. It is a relic of thought, a vessel of ideas and belief systems lost to the passage of time. It embodies a moment when a person, or perhaps a group, chose to communicate something private, sacred, or important through the enduring medium of bronze, a metal that resists decay and retains the memory of human touch. Imagining the hand that first held this key transports us to a world alive with sounds and smells distinct from ours. The air might have been heavy with the scent of olive trees and wild herbs, mingling with the faint aroma of smoke from clay hearths. Birds would have moved across the sky in predictable arcs, and the sea, not far from many of these settlements, would have whispered in rhythmic patterns against the shore. The person who held the key likely moved through these spaces with intention, stepping lightly over stones, passing courtyards alive with laughter, and approaching doors that concealed treasures, documents, or sacred spaces. Each turn of the wrist, each careful insertion of the key into a lock, would have been a moment charged with significance. And yet, over centuries, the physical structures fell. The locks rusted, and the chambers disappeared, leaving only the key to speak of the hidden world it once served. Modern researchers have attempted to replicate the key, forging bronze replicas in workshops and studying the metallurgy of the original. They discovered that the bronze alloy was unusually pure for its time, suggesting access to refined metal and advanced techniques. The weight of the key, balanced and precise, implies careful consideration of how it would feel in a hand, how it would function when turned. The symbolic carvings were likely added after casting, engraved with tools that required patience and skill, further indicating that the key was valued beyond its utilitarian purpose. Some even theorize that the key may have been used in combination with other objects, a lockbox, a chest, or a mechanism, now lost entirely to history, forming a complex system that blended technology, ritual, and secrecy. Despite extensive excavation and research, the lock that this key was meant to open has never been found. Nearby structures show no traces of hidden compartments, and no surviving manuscripts reference its use explicitly. Yet in a sense, the key has succeeded where physical doors failed. It opens the imagination, bridging a gap of thousands of years and inviting us to contemplate the lives, beliefs, and practices of people whose voices no longer echo through halls and courtyards. It embodies the universal human desire to protect knowledge, to control access to important spaces, and to create symbols that endure beyond the mortal span of any individual. The key has inspired storytellers, historians, and even artists, who see in its form and mystery a reflection of broader themes: secrecy and revelation, protection and access, knowledge and ignorance. In museums, it rests in display cases, lit to reveal its contours, allowing visitors to trace the flowing carvings with their eyes, imagining the hands that shaped them. Scholars pore over photographs and 3D scans, theorizing about the life of the key and the people it belonged to. Writers craft narratives around it, filling in gaps with plausible fiction, breathing life into the silent bronze. Its story is not confined to its physical form. It extends into the minds and imaginations of all who encounter it, proving that some objects retain power even when detached from their original context. Ultimately, the Bronze Key of Greece is a testament to the enduring human inclination to leave marks that speak across time. It challenges assumptions about ordinary objects, transforms our understanding of ancient societies, and invites us to embrace curiosity as a bridge between past and present. Its silent presence beneath the soil, and now within our sight, reminds us that history is not only what is recorded in books or carved in stone, but also what survives in subtle, often overlooked artifacts that hint at complex lives, forgotten rituals, and unspoken stories. Each gaze upon the key is an invitation to imagine, to wonder, and to recognize that even the smallest objects can carry the weight of profound meaning. It is a key without a lock, yet it opens a doorway into our fascination with the past, and through it we glimpse the intimate, mysterious, and sometimes magical world of ancient Greece. The pendant that cradled lightning. In the rugged highlands of Peru, where wind sweeps across jagged peaks and clouds cling like veils to ancient terraces, a small silver pendant lay hidden for centuries, cradling within its delicate curves a story of power, reverence, and human ingenuity. It was discovered by chance in a quiet excavation near an abandoned ceremonial site, its surface worn smooth by time, yet still faintly etched with intricate designs that seemed to shimmer under the light. At first glance, it appears modest, a simple loop of silver forming a pendant meant to hang around a neck, yet closer examination reveals a subtle curvature and symmetry that suggest far more than decorative intent. This was no ordinary ornament. It was a vessel of both belief and elemental wonder, a connection between the wearer and the untamed forces of the highland storms that roared across the Andean sky. Archaeologists and metallurgists marveled at its construction. The silver had been expertly hammered and annealed, its surface engraved with delicate lightning motifs, jagged lines etched so precisely that they almost seemed to move when the light shifted. Tiny notches along the edge suggest that the pendant may have been designed to catch and reflect light in a specific manner, perhaps during rituals conducted at dawn or dusk, when the first rays of sun or the fleeting flashes of storm lightning could illuminate its surface. Surrounding the pendant were fragments of ceramic bowls, obsidian blades, and offerings of llama wool, dyed in vivid reds and ochres. These were remnants of ceremonial practices, hinting that the pendant was more than jewelry. It was a conduit, a sacred intermediary between human devotion and the awe-inspiring natural forces of the highlands. The discovery site itself adds layers to the mystery. Nestled atop a plateau, the ceremonial platform overlooked valleys that stretched endlessly, dotted with terraced fields and winding pathways. Lightning frequently dances across these skies, and some local legends spoke of objects that could capture the essence of the storms, storing their power in precious metals. Could this silver pendant, with its lightning motifs and precise craftsmanship, have been such an object? The idea is not as far-fetched as it might seem. In Andean cultures, natural phenomena were often deified, with storms, rain, and sunlight personified and integrated into religious and daily life. This pendant, perhaps, was intended to harness or honor the violent beauty of the storms, worn by a priest or shaman who mediated between the people and the heavens. The pendant's form is deceptively simple, yet its subtle features betray a deeper purpose. The central loop, perfectly balanced, hints at use as a focus during ritual dances or ceremonies, where movement and light would have caused the etched lightning to flicker like tiny arcs, invoking the presence of the gods. Scholars have noted similar motifs in nearby sites, carved into stone or etched on ceramics, suggesting a symbolic language linking lightning, silver, and divine favor. Silver itself, valued not only for its luster but also for its conductivity, may have held symbolic or even practical significance in these ceremonies. The pendant's small size allowed it to be worn close to the body, perhaps over the heart, a literal and figurative site for storing power or blessing. Theories about its function vary. Some suggest it was an amulet, a protective charm against storms or misfortune. Others believe it may have been a ceremonial token, a marker of rank or spiritual attainment within a religious hierarchy. The precise engravings and careful finishing indicate that whoever created it possessed not only skill but a deep understanding of symbolism, craftsmanship, and ritual practice. It is easy to imagine the pendant being passed from hand to hand, gifted during important ceremonies, or buried intentionally to mark an event or consecrate a space. Its survival, nestled in the soil untouched by looters for centuries, hints at reverence or concealment, a deliberate act ensuring that its power or its memory would endure beyond the reach of ordinary life. Examination under modern techniques reveals a faint residue along the interior loop, traces of organic material that might have been leather, textile, or cord used to secure the pendant. The residue could also hold chemical markers indicating ritual use, perhaps contact with plant extracts, sacred resins, or ceremonial oils. Scientists hypothesize that these substances could have enhanced the pendant's symbolic or perceived power, reinforcing the connection between wearer and sky, human and storm. Each detail, from engraving to residue, tells a fragment of a story, inviting us to reconstruct a world where humans sought to interact with the forces of nature in intimate, tangible ways. As scholars and enthusiasts study the pendant, they are drawn into imagining the people who first created and wore it. They lived in a landscape of extremes, where storms could be sudden and violent, yet life persisted through careful observation, ritual, and adaptation. The pendant may have been a bridge between human vulnerability and cosmic forces, a small object embodying enormous spiritual and cultural significance. Its survival is remarkable, a fragile connection to the beliefs, fears, and aspirations of a society whose voice resonates faintly through earth and artifact. Despite centuries of exposure to the elements, the silver still glimmers faintly, as if holding a fragment of the storms themselves. In museums and research centers, it sits quietly, drawing the gaze of those who study it, evoking both curiosity and wonder. Its story is incomplete, yet complete in its ability to ignite imagination. Every observation, every hypothesis, every reconstruction of ritual or daily use adds richness to a narrative that stretches across time. The pendant, in its delicate resilience, challenges us to consider the intimate ways humans have always sought to grasp the ungraspable, to honor what cannot be controlled, and to preserve beauty, power, and meaning in the smallest of forms. This silver pendant, cradling lightning, is a testament to human creativity, spiritual engagement, and technical mastery. It teaches that even the smallest objects, shaped by hands long gone, can carry immense significance. It opens doors not to chambers or vaults, but to imagination, cultural memory, and the awe of those who first understood that a piece of silver, crafted with intent and belief, could hold the essence of a storm, the reverence of a people, and the unbroken passage of time. As the pendant story unfolds, researchers began tracing parallels across the Andean region, connecting this small silver artifact to a broader tapestry of ritual practice, metallurgy, and cosmology. Excavations nearby revealed remnants of ceremonial platforms carved into the bedrock, stone altars etched with celestial motifs, and fragments of textiles dyed with pigments that have endured millennia. The threads of these sites intertwined with the pendant, suggesting a ritual ecosystem in which each object, each placement, and each symbol formed part of a larger sacred framework. Some stones bore markings resembling arcs of lightning, echoing the pendant's engravings, while others depicted clouds and serpentine forms, believed to represent the movement of atmospheric energy. These visual correspondences hint at a sophisticated symbolic system in which silver, lightning, and ritual performance were inseparable. Ethnographers studying the oral traditions of highland communities discovered persistent stories of objects imbued with the power of storms, passed down in hushed tones across generations. Elders described ceremonial items that could catch the sky or carry the thunder, tangible representations of the forces that shaped crops, rivers, and human fate. The pendant aligns strikingly with these traditions, suggesting that it was not merely decorative but functional in the spiritual and cosmological imagination of its makers. Each flash of lightning in the surrounding mountains might have been interpreted as a communication from ancestors or deities, and the pendant could have acted as an intermediary, drawing that energy into a form the human body could carry and honor. Scientific analysis further deepened the pendant's intrigue. Metallurgists noted subtle traces of alloying that indicated highly controlled heating and cooling techniques, hinting at a level of technological sophistication that challenges assumptions about the period. The silver's purity, combined with faint traces of copper, would have enhanced both its luster and durability, creating a surface ideal for ritual focus. Microscopic study of the engraved lines revealed precision unmatched in casual adornments, suggesting that artisans employed specialized tools and repeated techniques over extended periods. It is as though the pendant itself was both a product of and a record of human ingenuity, capturing not just the image of lightning, but the skill, intention, and cosmological knowledge of those who shaped it. Beyond technical marvels, the pendant's social and spiritual significance becomes clearer when considered in context. It may have been worn during ceremonies marking agricultural cycles, rainfall, or the summoning of favorable weather. Anthropologists propose that certain orientations or gestures when wearing the pendant could align with solar and lunar positions, integrating the artifact into the broader framework of Andean cosmology. Its reflective silver surface may have mirrored the first light of dawn or the last glow of dusk, animating the engraved lightning and creating an optical phenomenon that transformed a simple pendant into a miniature display of celestial power. Those who witnessed such spectacles would have understood immediately that the wearer held not mere ornamentation, but a concentrated, symbolic force. The pendant's small size belies its narrative weight. Buried beneath soil for centuries, it survived earthquakes, floods, and human upheaval, guarding the secrets of its past. When first unearthed, the surrounding earth seemed to cradle it tenderly, as if even the land recognized its importance. For archaeologists, each layer of sediment tells a story, recording centuries of environmental change, human activity, and ritual continuity. Through soil analysis and carbon dating of nearby organic remains, scholars reconstructed a timeline suggesting that the pendant's creation coincided with a period of intense ritual innovation and regional exchange. Its designs may reflect influences from distant highland communities, indicating trade, cultural dialogue, or shared religious motifs. Cultural anthropologists examining the pendant's motifs drew connections between its lightning imagery and broader Andean beliefs surrounding duality, transformation, and the interface between natural and human-made worlds. Lightning, a sudden and potent force, embodies both destruction and regeneration, striking without warning yet nourishing the land through rain. By encapsulating this force in silver, the pendant's makers may have sought to channel these paradoxical energies, creating an object that mediated between human vulnerability and divine power. In essence, the pendant becomes a testament to the human desire, not merely to survive, but to comprehend and engage with the forces that shape existence. Its journey from creation to discovery tells multiple stories simultaneously. A story of craftsmanship, of spiritual practice, of human curiosity and fear, and of the remarkable endurance of cultural memory. As modern observers handle the pendant with gloved hands, taking care not to disturb its delicate form, they are participating in a chain of reverence extending back centuries. Every scratch, every curve, every subtle dent is a fingerprint of history, echoing the hands that first molded it, the ceremonies it witnessed, and the landscapes over which it has silently presided. The pendant also sparks reflection on perception and belief. To the contemporary eye, it may seem simply a piece of jewelry, yet in its original context, it was a potent symbol, a nexus between the earthly and the celestial. Its survival challenges the notion that only monumental architecture or grand tombs preserve cultural meaning. Sometimes, it is the smallest objects, easily overlooked, that contain the richest narratives, offering insight into the intimate and intricate ways humans engage with their environment, their gods, and each other. As researchers continue to study the pendant, they uncover further evidence of its multifaceted significance. Wear patterns suggest that it was not static. It may have swung, shimmered, and moved with the body, interacting with light and shadow in carefully choreographed ways. These dynamic qualities could have amplified its ritual effect, creating fleeting glimpses of power that intensified during storms or festivals. Such interplay between object, environment, and human action transforms a silver pendant into a living instrument, a medium through which cosmic energy could be perceived and honored. Even today, the pendant evokes a profound sense of wonder. Scholars, enthusiasts, and visitors alike find themselves drawn to its quiet authority, imagining the highland priests or shamans who first carried it, their eyes reflecting the lightning above, their voices rising in chants that echo faintly across centuries. It serves as a reminder that objects are never inert. They carry memory, intention, and resonance far beyond their physical form. In the silver's subtle gleam, one can almost see the storms of centuries past, feel the reverent hands that touched it, and hear the whispers of a world where humans and the elements were entwined in complex, intimate dialogue. The pendant story does not end with discovery. Exhibitions, research publications, and digital reconstructions extend its influence, inviting new generations to consider the intersection of art, science, spirituality, and nature. Each reinterpretation adds nuance, bridging the gap between ancient practice and contemporary understanding. As scholars debate its precise use and significance, the pendant continues to captivate, embodying a human fascination with harnessing, venerating, and contemplating forces larger than ourselves. Ultimately, the pendant that cradled lightning stands as a testament to human ingenuity, resilience, and reverence for the natural world. Its delicate silver form holds within it centuries of culture, ritual, and belief, challenging modern observers to perceive the power contained in small objects. It reminds us that even the tiniest relics can hold vast stories, connecting the past and present, the human and the divine, in ways that words alone can scarcely convey. The horn that screamed in silence. The horn that screamed in silence lay buried beneath layers of sod and soil, hidden in a forgotten corner of Ireland, where rolling hills meet windswept moors, and the sky seems to hold its breath. When first unearthed, the artifact seemed almost alive in its quietude, a bronze curve that hinted at ceremonial significance far beyond its modest size. Its surface, mottled with verdigris, glimmered faintly in the light, as though it still remembered the hands that had once fashioned it, the mouths that had pressed against its rim, and the vast, reverberating sound it had once projected, though the horn itself, now silent, seemed to scream through the centuries. Archaeologists immediately recognized its uniqueness. Unlike ordinary instruments of war or signaling, this horn bore elaborate engravings, swirling spirals, interlocking circles, and enigmatic symbols that resisted straightforward interpretation. Some scholars suggested that these markings were not merely decorative, but encoded messages, possibly related to ritual practice, celestial events, or ancestral lineage. Their lines traced the metal in a way that seemed almost organic, as if the horn itself had grown from the earth, shaped by the hands of those who understood forces both human and divine. Nearby, excavations revealed a network of megalithic structures, stone circles, burial mounds, and earthen platforms, hinting at a complex society deeply invested in ritual and celestial observation. The horn's placement within one of these mounds suggested it was not a casual possession, but an object of reverence, perhaps used in ceremonies marking seasonal cycles, solar or lunar transitions, or communication with forces beyond mortal comprehension. Soil analysis revealed traces of organic matter consistent with ceremonial offerings, including burned herbs, animal bones, and pigments now faded, each layer of deposition telling a story of repeated use, veneration, and care. Ethnographers studying local folklore found echoes of the horn in oral traditions passed down through generations. Stories spoke of a horn that could call forth storms, summon ancestral spirits, or carry the voices of the departed to the living. Its sound was said to resonate across valleys and hills, a scream in the silence that only the attuned could hear. Some accounts described its deployment in moments of profound significance: coronations, funerary rites, or moments when the veil between the mortal and the spiritual worlds was believed to thin. The horn's silence in the present amplifies these legends, leaving us to imagine the magnitude of sound and influence it once wielded. Scientific examination revealed the horn's remarkable metallurgy. Cast in bronze, it displayed evidence of sophisticated techniques, including careful control of heat during casting and subtle hammering to refine resonance. The interior bore traces of deliberate shaping, possibly to produce specific tonal qualities. Metallurgists noted the absence of modern impurities, suggesting that the artisans possessed a profound understanding of the materials at their disposal. The horn, in essence, was not merely an instrument, but a technological marvel, an embodiment of knowledge, skill, and intention. The horn's engravings continued to captivate researchers. Spirals aligned with cardinal directions, concentric circles appeared to correspond to lunar phases, and intersecting lines suggested maps of celestial movements or migratory patterns of animals. Could the horn have functioned as a tool for both ritual and observation, a dual-purpose object bridging the human and natural worlds? Some theorists argued that the horn might have been sounded in synchrony with astronomical events, amplifying its effect, and connecting earthly ceremonies with cosmic rhythms. Each line, each curve, each indentation becomes a clue, a whisper from the past that invites contemplation and study. Archaeologists also noted wear patterns along the horn's mouthpiece and rim, implying repeated use. The horn had not been a static object, it had lived, vibrated, and resonated through ceremonies, through the hands and lips of those trained to manipulate its voice. Tiny scratches hinted at deliberate tuning, while faint discoloration suggested contact with oils or resins, possibly to maintain the metal, enhance sound, or imbue the object with symbolic potency. Every mark tells a story, every imperfection a record of human interaction, echoing the presence of long-gone hands and breaths. The horn's context within the broader landscape of ritual practice revealed its social significance. Nearby mounds contained human remains, suggesting that ceremonial use may have coincided with funerary rites or ancestral veneration. Some burial sites held multiple layers of occupation, indicating continuity of ritual and possibly intergenerational knowledge transfer. The horn, therefore, is more than a musical artifact. It is a social instrument, a marker of status, a vessel for cultural memory, and a connector of people, time, and space. Anthropologists exploring auditory perception in ancient contexts speculate on the psychological effect of such instruments. The horn's sound, projected over long distances and shaped by valleys, hills, and stone formations, would have carried not just audible vibrations but also a symbolic weight. To the communities of its time, the horn's scream may have represented the voice of ancestors, the warning of spirits, or the presence of the divine. Its silence today forces modern listeners to reconstruct its acoustic power in imagination, an exercise in empathy and historical cognition. Material analysis also suggested trade and cultural exchange. Trace elements in the bronze indicated sources of copper and tin from distant regions, implying that the horn was part of a broader network of material movement and technological knowledge. This connectivity enhances the artifact's narrative, situating it not only within a local ceremonial tradition, but also within trans-regional patterns of exchange, ritual innovation, and artistic expression. The horn becomes a testament to both local ingenuity and the broader networks of human interaction across prehistoric Europe. The horn's enduring mystery lies in its dual nature, both silent and screaming. It embodies the paradox of ritual objects. They are simultaneously present and absent, tangible yet symbolic, practical yet transcendental. To handle the horn is to hold centuries of layered intention, skill, and belief. Each gesture, from excavation to exhibition, resonates with this legacy, reminding us that artifacts are not merely objects but vessels of memory, imagination, and power. As contemporary observers engage with the horn, it challenges us to reconsider our understanding of sound, silence, and ritual significance. What did it mean to hear a horn scream in silence? How did communities interpret its voice in the natural and social world? Every hypothesis opens a window into the lives, fears, aspirations, and creative capacities of people long gone. The horn is at once an instrument, a message, and a key to understanding the interplay between culture, environment, and belief in prehistoric Ireland. The horn's story did not end with its discovery. Rather, it expanded into layers of interpretation, imagination, and study, revealing a complexity that deepened with each passing year. Once removed from the soil, its quiet surface seemed to hum with latent energy, as if centuries of ceremonial use had left echoes trapped within its bronze curves. Researchers began to investigate its acoustic properties, employing modern technology to recreate the sounds it might have produced. Sound engineers and archaeologists worked together, constructing replicas, studying airflow, and analyzing resonance patterns. The results were astonishing. When played correctly, the horn could generate notes that seemed almost otherworldly, harmonics that reverberated across great distances, and overtones that merged with environmental sounds, the wind, the rustle of grass, even distant waters, creating a symphony that blurred the boundary between human and nature. Experimental archaeology revealed that the horn's design was intentionally intricate. Its tapering curves and subtly flared bell allowed for modulation of pitch, enabling skilled players to produce sequences that may have corresponded to ritual chants, invocations, or coded signals. Ancient musicians could have controlled tone and volume through embouchure and breath, but also through subtle manipulation of the horn's surface. Some grooves may have functioned as tuning guides, while internal ridges could have created resonance patterns tailored to specific ceremonial spaces. The horn was thus both a musical instrument and a technological artifact, a manifestation of ancient understanding that married artistry, science, and spiritual intent. Historical records, sparse and fragmented, hint at the horn's significance in Bronze Age Ireland and beyond. Mentions of ceremonial horns appear in early texts describing gatherings of chieftains, druids, and ritual specialists, though details are often obscured by myth. In one account, a horn was said to signal the changing of seasons, to summon warriors for defense, or to invoke blessings upon fields and livestock. Another describes a horn sounded during funerary rites, its tones believed to guide the dead safely to the afterlife. While it is impossible to know whether these accounts refer to the same artifact, the parallels between the written record and the horn's characteristics suggest that it was part of a larger tradition, one that wove sound, ceremony, and belief into the fabric of community life. The horn's engravings continued to confound and inspire researchers. Symbols resembling spirals, concentric circles, and interlocking arcs were analyzed under microscopic examination. Some scholars proposed that these motifs corresponded to cosmological concepts, the sun, moon, stars, and seasonal cycles, while others suggested symbolic representations of ancestral lineages, deities, or elemental forces. The placement of these patterns along the horn's surface might have been intentional, guiding the player's hands or breaths in synchrony with ritual timing. Every mark on the bronze, every indentation, seems to whisper a story from a past world, a code awaiting interpretation that blends artistry, ritual, and mathematics. Beyond its physical and symbolic aspects, the horn also opens questions about social hierarchy and communal identity. In a society where ceremonial performance could reinforce power structures, the horn may have functioned as both an emblem and a tool. Those who played it or possessed it were likely individuals of significant status, priests, chieftains, or ritual specialists. Its sound would have commanded attention, signaling authority, summoning assembly, or marking sacred time. The horn's presence within a mound, alongside human remains, offerings, and other ritual artifacts, further emphasizes its integration into societal structures that combined political, spiritual, and ceremonial authority. The horn's geographic context provides additional insight. Excavated from a region dense with ritual monuments, stone circles, and burial mounds, it sits at the intersection of human settlement and sacred space. Lines of sight from its original location extend to other ceremonial sites, suggesting coordinated ritual practices. Some researchers speculate that the horn may have been sounded to link distant monuments, to create auditory connections that reinforced social cohesion, or to mark seasonal observances. This possibility paints a picture of a landscape alive with sound, ritual, and communal memory, with the horn as both medium and messenger. Material studies deepened appreciation for the horn's craftsmanship. Analysis revealed a precise alloy of copper and tin, carefully measured to optimize resonance while maintaining durability. Traces of organic compounds suggested the horn had been treated with oils or resins, potentially to enhance sound quality, or for symbolic reasons. The production of such an object required access to high-quality metals, specialized knowledge, and skilled labor, implying a network of artisans and trade that extended beyond a single settlement. The horn embodies the intersection of artistry, technical mastery, and ritual function, a cultural keystone forged in bronze. Ethnographic comparisons offer further perspectives. Across Europe and beyond, ceremonial horns appear in analogous contexts as instruments of communication, ritual, and social structuring. The Irish horn's features, size, shape, decoration, and acoustic properties resonate with examples from the British Isles, Scandinavia, and the Mediterranean. These parallels suggest a shared understanding of sound's ritual power, a pan-regional recognition of music as a conduit between human and divine realms. Yet the horn also retains unique characteristics, distinguishing it as a product of local innovation, blending global influences with specific cultural context. The horn's legacy extends into imagination, storytelling, and modern cultural consciousness. Scholars, musicians, and enthusiasts have attempted to reconstruct its voice, performing in open fields, echoing valleys, and recreated ritual spaces. Contemporary listeners describe a sense of awe, a sensation of temporal dislocation, as though the horn's sound bridges millennia. Its scream in silence becomes a metaphor for memory itself, an artifact whose presence is defined not by noise alone, but by the resonance it leaves in human awareness. Furthermore, the horn challenges our assumptions about prehistoric societies. It illustrates the sophistication of Bronze Age Ireland, its mastery of metallurgy, ritual complexity, and social structure. The horn's acoustics, design, and symbolism demonstrate that prehistoric communities were not merely subsistence-based, but possessed rich ceremonial lives, sophisticated technical knowledge, and profound conceptual frameworks. Its survival across centuries offers a tangible link to these societies, inviting modern audiences to engage with their ingenuity, creativity, and spiritual imagination. Archaeologists continue to study the horn with advanced methods: 3D scanning, metallurgical spectroscopy, acoustic modeling, and digital reconstruction. Each technique uncovers new dimensions of understanding, subtle imperfections that reveal casting techniques, wear patterns that indicate frequency and manner of use, and acoustic simulations that suggest ritual applications. These studies confirm that the horn was far more than an ornamental object. It was an active participant in human ritual, a nexus of sound, symbolism, and social interaction. The horn's cultural resonance has inspired artistic and scholarly works, from musical compositions replicating its tones to visual art interpreting its forms and engravings. Its presence in museum exhibitions connects audiences with the tactile, auditory, and symbolic world of Bronze Age Ireland. Visitors, standing before its bronze surface, encounter a dialogue across time, imagining the ceremonies it accompanied, the hands that played it, and the skies under which its scream once echoed. In conclusion, the horn that screamed in silence is more than a ceremonial artifact. It embodies the intertwining of sound, ritual, and social meaning, the convergence of craftsmanship, artistry, and spiritual purpose, and the persistence of cultural memory across millennia. Its discovery illuminates not only the technological capabilities of its makers, but also the depth of their symbolic imagination and the resonance of their rituals. As the horn remains silent today, its scream endures in scholarship, performance, and imagination. A voice from the past that continues to shape our understanding of human history, ritual, and the profound power of sound. The statue that breathed fire. Deep within the earthen layers of an ancient Shang dynasty site, archaeologists uncovered a bronze figure unlike any other. Its discovery sent ripples of fascination through the scholarly world, not merely because of its age or craftsmanship, but because of the aura it carried, an almost palpable presence that suggested a purpose beyond mere representation. The statue that breathed fire seemed to encapsulate both the physical mastery and spiritual imagination of the Shang artisans, an artifact that connected metallurgy, ritual, and the very essence of belief. Standing less than a meter tall, it depicts a humanoid form, with exaggerated features, flared nostrils, wide eyes, and a gaping mouth from which flames were imagined to pour in ritual narrative. The bronze itself, aged to a deep dark patina, retains traces of gilding and painted pigments, suggesting that in its original state, it was a vivid, almost otherworldly figure, glinting in candlelight or sunlight filtered through temple openings. Careful study revealed that the statue's hollow interior was intentional, designed to allow for the passage of air, incense smoke, or perhaps a ritual flame. Experiments have shown that when warmed, or when incense was burned within, wisps of smoke would curl from the mouth, giving the impression that the statue itself exhaled fire. This ability to animate the inanimate, to blend metallurgy with ritual performance, speaks to a culture that understood symbolic theater, acoustic and visual effects, and psychological presence in ceremonies. The effect would have been awe-inspiring, evoking fear, reverence, and a sense of cosmic power in those who beheld it. The Shang dynasty, known for its complex urban centers, hierarchical social structures, and elaborate rituals surrounding life, death, and the natural world, provides a context in which this statue becomes profoundly meaningful. Fire was central in Shang ritual, associated with purification, transformation, and the presence of ancestors or deities. To breathe fire, or to seem as though it did, was to command attention, to manifest the power of the divine in a tangible, visceral way. The statue was not merely symbolic, it was performative, a conduit for forces beyond human comprehension, and an object through which the living could engage with spiritual realities. Examination of the statue's construction reveals astonishing technical skill. The bronze casting was achieved using piece mold techniques, a hallmark of Shang artistry, which allowed for intricate detail and durable structures. Tiny rivets and seams suggest the assembly of multiple bronze sections, joined meticulously to create both stability and functionality. The interior channels and venting points are precise, designed to manipulate airflow and smoke dispersion, revealing an understanding of natural dynamics and a sophisticated grasp of physical principles. Such precision suggests collaboration among artisans, metallurgists, and ritual specialists, each contributing specialized knowledge to create a unified, functional, and spiritually potent object. Engravings along the statue's back and base further hint at its ceremonial use. These include stylized dragons, tigers, and ancestral motifs, alongside inscriptions in early Chinese script, perhaps naming the deity represented, invoking protective spirits, or recording offerings made to the idol. The combination of animal motifs with human form underscores the Shang worldview, in which humans, animals, and the divine coexisted within a structured cosmology. Each detail is deliberate, intended to communicate status, invoke spiritual power, and engage the senses of ritual participants. The statue's eyes, large and round, seem almost alive, capturing light and drawing the observer into a dialogue between human and supernatural realms. Historical records from oracle bones and early bronze inscriptions provide tantalizing glimpses into the possible role of such statues. They describe elaborate ceremonies, sacrifices, and offerings conducted to honor ancestors, beseech favor, or assert political legitimacy. Fire, smoke, and bronze objects were integral, serving both as markers of ritual authority and as tools to manipulate perception. The statue that breathed fire embodies all these elements, merging aesthetic sophistication with spiritual function. Its presence within a temple or ritual site would have been commanding, a visual and sensory centerpiece capable of anchoring communal belief and asserting hierarchical power. Beyond its ceremonial and aesthetic dimensions, the statue also illuminates the technological sophistication of the Shang era. Bronze metallurgy required access to tin and copper, precise smelting techniques, and an understanding of alloy composition. Achieving a form capable of producing both visual splendor and functional performance, such as channeling smoke, demonstrates a level of engineering and craft that challenges modern assumptions about ancient capabilities. The statue represents the fusion of art, technology, and spiritual practice, a testament to a society that seamlessly integrated these domains. The statue's rediscovery has inspired interdisciplinary study. Archaeologists, metallurgists, historians, and sound engineers have collaborated to understand its design, function, and ritual impact. Simulations using modern materials and controlled smoke experiments have reconstructed how the statue might have performed during ceremonies. Observers report that even a small wisp of smoke emanating from the mouth evokes the sensation of life, as if the figure momentarily becomes animate, a bridge between the mortal and the divine. This effect underscores the Shang understanding of sensory manipulation as a tool of religious and political influence, reflecting a nuanced grasp of psychology and ritual aesthetics. Cultural parallels in other Bronze Age societies further highlight the statue's significance. In Mesopotamia, Anatolia, and Central Europe, bronze figures and ritual vessels were used in ceremonial contexts, sometimes incorporating fire or smoke. Yet the specific combination of human form, functional smoke channels, and symbolic engravings in the Shang statue is uniquely sophisticated, revealing a localized innovation with profound spiritual resonance. It reflects not just artistic skill, but also an integrated worldview in which human, divine, and natural realms interacted continuously, mediated by ritual practice and symbolic objects. The statue that breathed fire has also shaped modern imagination. Exhibitions in museums allow viewers to witness replicas in controlled settings, experiencing the interplay of bronze, light, and smoke. Artists and musicians have drawn inspiration from its form and function, exploring themes of transformation, ritual, and the interface between human ingenuity and spiritual expression. Its presence evokes wonder, bridging thousands of years to remind contemporary audiences of the depth of human creativity and the universality of our fascination with life, fire, and the unknown. Moreover, the statue's discovery challenges simplistic notions of ancient societies. It demonstrates that Shang civilization was not merely functional but deeply imaginative, capable of conceptual complexity and symbolic communication. The creation of an object that seems to breathe fire reflects an understanding of spectacle, psychological impact, and the interplay of ritual, art, and technology. In this sense, the statue is both an archaeological treasure and a lens through which we can explore the sophistication of early Chinese civilization, offering insight into values, beliefs, and the mastery of materials and environment. Material analysis continues to uncover new secrets. Microscopic studies reveal traces of organic residues, perhaps incense or oils used to enhance smoke effects or preserve the bronze. Isotopic studies suggest the sources of tin and copper, revealing trade networks and material acquisition strategies that extended across regions. Every finding adds nuance, painting a picture of a society capable of long-distance exchange, technical innovation, and complex ceremonial life. The statue, far from being static, continues to speak, revealing stories encoded in its form, materials, and function. In sum, the statue that breathed fire stands as a symbol of human ingenuity, ritual sophistication, and spiritual imagination. Its ability to seemingly exhale smoke, its intricate engravings, its precise bronze casting, and its placement within a cosmologically meaningful context reveal a civilization attuned to the power of symbolism, sensory experience, and ceremonial practice. It embodies the convergence of art, technology, and belief, offering a tangible connection to a world both ancient and profoundly intelligent. Even now, centuries after it was first crafted, the statue continues to inspire awe. It challenges our perceptions of what ancient peoples could achieve, reminding us that imagination and technical skill have always been intertwined. The flames it seems to breathe are more than visual spectacle. They are a testament to the human desire to bridge the natural and supernatural, to transform material into meaning, and to communicate across the chasm of time. The statue that breathed fire remains a silent yet potent voice from the Shang dynasty, a relic that speaks not only of fire, bronze, and ritual, but also of enduring human ingenuity and the timeless quest to make the unseen visible. The jar that contained time. Deep in the arid plains of southern Peru, amidst the sprawling desert hills etched by the hands of ancient civilizations, a discovery was made that would alter our understanding of the Nazca people and their complex relationship with mortality, ritual, and the passage of time. Buried beneath layers of wind-blown sand, archaeologists unearthed a funerary ceramic jar that seemed, at first glance, ordinary, a vessel intended to accompany the dead into the afterlife. Yet as the dust was meticulously brushed away, as light and shadow played across its intricate surface, it became clear that this was no ordinary jar. Known today as the jar that contained time, the artifact is both a container of remains and a symbolic vessel of cosmic significance, a tangible representation of the Nazca conception of life, death, and eternity. The jar stands nearly a meter tall, its form elongated and gently curved, tapering toward the base to allow stability while also creating a sense of upward movement. Its surface is decorated with geometric motifs, stylized figures, and complex iconography that seem at once familiar and entirely alien. Spirals, concentric circles, and interwoven lines cover the exterior, punctuated by depictions of animals and humans in ceremonial poses, birds with elongated wings, serpents curling in endless loops, and human figures with exaggerated features suggest mythological narratives or ritual scenes, perhaps encoding knowledge of cosmology, genealogy, and spiritual journeys. The pigments, though faded, hint at vivid reds, deep blues, and muted yellows, creating a palette that would have been striking under the desert sun, commanding attention and evoking awe. The function of the jar extends beyond mortuary practice. Analysis of residues and internal structure reveals an extraordinary sophistication in material use. The Nazca were master potters, capable of controlling firing temperatures to achieve durability, sheen, and subtle tonal variations. The clay composition, sourced from distant riverbeds and enriched with fine sand and organic material, indicates careful selection to create a vessel both resilient and symbolic. Within the jar, archaeologists found not just human remains, but also traces of herbs, pigments, and possibly ceremonial liquids, suggesting that it functioned as a repository of memory and ritual energy, a vessel in which life, death, and symbolic time were intimately intertwined. The very concept of containing time, of embodying it within a ceramic form, reflects a worldview in which mortality was not an end but a transformation, a cycle to be observed, honored, and perpetuated. In Nazca cosmology, the living and the dead were not wholly separate. Ancestors influenced daily life, controlled weather, fertility, and prosperity, and were invoked through ritual objects like this jar. Each spiral, each painted motif, can be interpreted as a marker of time's passage, a representation of generations, cycles of the moon and sun, and the continuity of life across centuries. The jar itself becomes a kind of clock, not in the mechanical sense, but in the symbolic, eternal sense, a tangible manifestation of time's relentless, sacred flow. Excavation revealed that the jar was positioned carefully within a burial site, aligned with celestial markers that suggest an astronomical dimension to its placement. The mouth of the jar faces slightly toward the horizon where the sun rises during solstices, while the base aligns with subterranean channels of wind and sand, creating subtle acoustic effects when breezes pass through. Such attention to placement demonstrates an understanding of environment and ritual interplay, emphasizing that the jar was not merely a container, but an instrument for engaging with the cosmos, a vessel through which the living could communicate with ancestors and the unseen forces that governed their world. Inside, the jar contained layers of human remains interspersed with small offerings. Shells, miniature figurines, textile fragments, and beads suggest complex funerary rites. Each layer appears to correspond to a temporal sequence, perhaps representing stages of life, spiritual ascent, or ritual purification. The arrangement indicates intentionality, a deliberate effort to structure time and memory within the vessel to guide the spirit of the deceased through a symbolic journey. Scholars suggest that the jar's contents were designed to accompany the soul on its cyclical journey, reflecting Nazca beliefs about reincarnation, ancestral guidance, and the continuity of life. The iconography on the jar's surface also provides insight into the broader cultural and mythological landscape of the Nazca people. Anthropomorphic figures with outstretched arms, often surrounded by animals, seem to enact ritual dances or ceremonial performances. Birds, frequently depicted with long, elegant wings, may symbolize transcendence, freedom of the soul, or communication with divine realms. Serpents, coiled and intertwined, could signify regeneration, the cyclical nature of life, or hidden knowledge. Concentric circles, spirals, and labyrinthine patterns suggest an understanding of spatial and temporal cycles, embedding a visual representation of time's continuity within the ceramic form itself. Technological analysis reveals further sophistication. The jar was fired at high temperatures, creating a surface resistant to erosion while preserving delicate pigments. Microcracks and internal voids indicate that the artisans were deliberately manipulating airflow and thermal expansion to achieve both durability and functionality. When combined with ritual practices such as burning incense, pouring liquids, or placing ceremonial offerings, the jar would have become an interactive instrument, capable of producing subtle olfactory, visual, and auditory effects. These sensory dimensions enhanced its ritual potency, reinforcing the sense that time, memory, and spiritual presence were intertwined within its ceramic walls. The jar's discovery in the early 21st century challenged existing interpretations of Nazca funerary practices. Previous research focused primarily on flat textiles, geoglyphs, and painted ceramics, often overlooking the possibility that three-dimensional vessels could serve as symbolic timekeepers. The jar that contained time, with its intricate construction, layered contents, and cosmic alignment, revealed a depth of ritual sophistication previously unappreciated. It demonstrated that the Nazca were not merely artisans, but philosophers, astronomers, and ritual theorists, capable of encoding complex metaphysical ideas into tangible, enduring forms. Beyond the material and technical aspects, the jar resonates with a psychological and emotional significance. In observing its careful layering, meticulous decoration, and deliberate placement, modern viewers experience a sense of continuity, connection, and reverence. It evokes contemplation of mortality, the passage of time, and humanity's enduring desire to leave a mark upon the world. In this sense, the jar functions as both artifact and narrative, conveying not only historical information, but also the values, beliefs, and sensibilities of its creators. Its presence is a reminder that time is both lived and remembered, experienced and contained, and that the human impulse to honor life and death transcends millennia. Comparative analysis with other Nazca vessels reveals recurring motifs and structural patterns, suggesting a shared symbolic language across regions and generations. Similar jars, though smaller or less elaborately decorated, often share spiral motifs, animal depictions, and layered contents. This points to a codified tradition in which funerary jars served as repositories, not just for physical remains but for narrative, memory, and cosmological knowledge. The jar that contained time, by contrast, represents a culmination of this tradition, a masterwork that encapsulates both technical prowess and profound spiritual insight. The interplay of form, function, and symbolism in the jar exemplifies the Nazca mastery of ritualized objects. Its tall, elongated shape emphasizes verticality, perhaps suggesting ascension or connection with celestial realms. The hollow interior, layered contents, and subtle venting for smoke or incense create a dynamic, interactive experience. The exterior decorations encode narrative and cosmology, while the placement within the desert landscape aligns with solar, lunar, and topographical markers. Together, these elements transform the jar from a passive container into an active participant in ceremonial life. a vessel that contains time, memory, and spiritual presence simultaneously. Modern reconstructions and exhibitions of the jar allow scholars and the public to witness its interplay of visual, tactile, and symbolic dimensions. When placed in a controlled light environment, shadows cast by its raised motifs create shifting patterns reminiscent of celestial movement. Researchers experimenting with the layering of incense within the hollow interior noted that the smoke patterns evoke spirals and concentric forms echoing the external decoration. These phenomena suggest that the original ritual experience was multisensory, integrating visual, olfactory, and symbolic elements to convey the passage of time and the cyclical nature of existence. The jar's discovery also catalyzed further exploration into Nazca cosmology, astronomy, and funerary practices. The precise alignment with solstitial sunrise and sunset, combined with the elaborate iconography, indicates a civilization deeply attuned to celestial cycles, capable of integrating environmental observation, ritual practice, and material culture. The vessel serves as a bridge between earthly life and the celestial sphere, a tangible manifestation of cosmological understanding encoded in clay and pigment. In addition to its spiritual and cosmological significance, the jar offers insights into social and political structures. The labor-intensive production, intricate decoration, and ceremonial importance suggest that it was commissioned or used by elite individuals or families, perhaps serving as a marker of status, ancestral lineage, or ritual authority. The coordination of artisans, specialists, and ritual practitioners required to create such a vessel indicates a complex society capable of organizing, preserving, and transmitting knowledge across generations. Over time, the jar remained sealed and protected, buried beneath shifting sands that preserved its form and contents. Its rediscovery allowed modern audiences to witness the extraordinary vision of the Nazca people, who transformed a simple ceramic vessel into a multi-dimensional repository of culture, cosmology, and memory. The jar continues to inspire research, speculation, and awe, standing as a testament to human creativity, ritual sophistication, and the enduring desire to contain and honor time itself. Every contour, every spiral, every trace of pigment invites reflection on the passage of generations, the cycles of life and death, and the intimate connection between the material and the metaphysical. The jar that contained time is more than a funerary vessel. It is a meditation in clay, a chronicle of human belief, and a reminder that even in the harshest desert environment, the imagination can flourish, recording and preserving the delicate interplay of life, death, and eternity. Its legacy endures not only in the archaeological record, but in the imagination of those who encounter it. Scholars continue to decode its symbols, scientists analyze its materials, and artists draw inspiration from its forms. In every study, every exhibition, and every reflection, the jar reminds us that time is not only measured but experienced, not only recorded but revered. It embodies a civilization's profound understanding that life, memory, and the cosmos are intertwined, and that even the simplest form, a humble ceramic jar, can hold within it the entirety of human perception and aspiration. The Nazca people, through this vessel, speak across centuries. They communicate a vision of existence in which the boundaries between life and death, past and future, human and divine, are porous and interconnected. The jar that contained time does not merely preserve remains, it preserves perspective, belief, and a sophisticated worldview, inviting all who encounter it to contemplate the flow of time, the cycles of nature, and the enduring power of ritual and imagination. The pyramid that moved shadows. In a quiet corner of a long-forgotten tomb, buried beneath layers of sand and centuries of shifting time, archaeologists discovered a miniature pyramid unlike any they had encountered before. At first glance, it seemed almost insignificant, small enough to fit within a scholar's hands, yet perfectly formed, each face smooth and sharply angled, each corner precise. Known now as the pyramid that moved shadows, this tiny structure holds mysteries far greater than its modest size might suggest, casting metaphorical and literal shadows that reach across history, culture, and human imagination. The pyramid is crafted from a dense, dark stone, polished to a soft sheen that captures the faintest light and reflects it with subtle glimmers. It stands barely 30 centimeters tall, yet its proportions mirror those of the Great Pyramids themselves, adhering to the same geometric perfection that has fascinated generations. Each side is adorned with delicate carvings, hieroglyphs etched so finely that magnification reveals the meticulous handwork of a master artisan. Symbols of gods, offerings, celestial bodies, and ritual scenes adorn its faces, intertwining narratives of divinity, kingship, and the passage of time. The creation of such a miniature form demonstrates not only technical skill, but an intimate understanding of symbolic representation. In Egyptian culture, the pyramid was not merely a tomb or monument, it was a conduit between the earthly and the divine, a tool for transformation, resurrection, and eternal memory. The replication of this form in miniature with exacting fidelity to the architecture and proportions of monumental pyramids suggests a ritual purpose far beyond ornamentation. It was designed to channel, focus, and manipulate presence and perception, creating a tangible link between the physical world and the shadowy realms beyond. The shadows cast by the miniature pyramid are unlike those of ordinary objects. When sunlight or torchlight strikes its polished surfaces, the angles produce subtle shifts in darkness and reflection, as if the structure itself responds to the environment. Scholars have observed that during certain times of day, the pyramid casts elongated, shifting shadows across surrounding surfaces, creating patterns that seem to mimic celestial alignments, lunar cycles, or the movement of the sun across the sky. The phenomenon appears deliberate, as though the artisans intended the pyramid to interact with light in a precise and meaningful way, producing a living dialogue between stone, sun, and observer. Inside, the pyramid is hollowed with astonishing precision, containing a chamber so small that only a few tiny objects could be placed within it. Traces of organic residue, pigments, and fragments of what might have been ceremonial offerings suggest that the interior was once used to house items of spiritual significance. Tiny amulets, miniature tools, or ritual figurines could have been stored inside, acting as surrogates for larger monumental offerings made at temples or in tombs. In this way, the miniature pyramid served both as a symbolic object and as a vessel for ritual energy, a concentrated form of sacred geometry intended to focus divine power or memory within a tangible artifact. The craftsmanship reveals a profound understanding of geometry, material properties, and sacred symbolism. Each plane, each angle, each groove is executed with care, reflecting a civilization deeply attuned to the principles of proportion, balance, and cosmic order. The hieroglyphs, though tiny, convey narratives of divine kingship, celestial authority, and ritual practice. Gods and pharaohs appear side by side, their forms carefully proportioned to echo the grandeur of monumental reliefs while adapting to the constraints of miniature scale. The pyramid, in its smallness, becomes an object of contemplation, inviting the viewer to consider the interplay between scale, meaning, and perception. The pyramid's discovery raises questions about its original context. Was it intended for use within a tomb, acting as a focus for the deceased's journey into the afterlife? Or was it part of a temple ritual, a portable object designed to interact with light and shadow during sacred ceremonies? Archaeologists suggest that it may have been both, a dual-purpose object that bridged private devotion and public ritual. Its portability allowed for careful positioning in relation to other structures, sunlight, and sacred spaces, emphasizing the Egyptians' understanding of environmental interaction and their desire to integrate natural and built elements into ceremonial practice. The shadows themselves became an essential aspect of the pyramid's function. As light shifted across its faces, elongated forms danced on surrounding walls or sand, creating dynamic, ephemeral images that changed by hour and season. These shifting patterns could have been interpreted as messages from the gods, markers of temporal cycles, or guides for ritual participants. In essence, the pyramid turned sunlight into narrative, using shadow as a medium to convey stories, sacred order, and divine presence. The discovery of the miniature pyramid also illuminated the symbolic layering inherent in Egyptian thought. In a culture obsessed with eternity, the replication of monumental forms in miniature suggests a desire to contain vastness within comprehensible human-scaled objects. The structure became a microcosm of the cosmos, a tangible model of sacred architecture, and a focus for spiritual meditation. Its small size did not diminish its power, rather it concentrated it, allowing for intimate interaction and contemplation that monumental pyramids could not provide. Materials analysis reveals the artisan's sophisticated knowledge of stone, polish, and light interaction. The dark mineral composition reflects light in a particular way, emphasizing angularity and depth, while the smooth surface encourages the subtle play of reflections. Tiny incisions create texture, modulating shadows and enhancing visual dynamics. The hollow chamber was carved with care, preserving structural integrity while enabling the storage of ritual objects. These details reveal a civilization capable of integrating artistry, symbolism, and material science into objects of profound spiritual significance. The pyramid's placement within its tomb or temple context further enhances its mystery. It was often aligned with architectural features, celestial markers, or pathways of the sun. When placed in these positions, the interplay of light and shadow could transform the space, animating walls, ceilings, and floors in ways that reinforced ritual meaning. Observers may have experienced these shifting shadows as messages from the divine, as indicators of temporal cycles, or as guides for ceremonial timing. The miniature pyramid, though small, became a dynamic participant in its environment, transforming perception and engaging participants in a dialogue with the sacred. Beyond its technical and symbolic aspects, the miniature pyramid carries an emotional resonance. Its creation required extraordinary patience, precision, and devotion. Each cut, each polish, each carved hieroglyph was an act of care, an offering of human attention and skill to the divine. In holding it, observing its reflections, and tracing the patterns of its shadows, one can sense the connection between creator, object, and observer, spanning centuries to convey reverence, devotion, and the human desire to touch eternity. The pyramid that moved shadows exemplifies the Egyptians' mastery of scale, symbolism, and interaction with the natural world. It demonstrates that monumental ideas could be expressed in intimate forms, that divine presence could be mediated through careful manipulation of light and shadow, and that objects could function as both containers of meaning and active participants in ritual practice. Its discovery continues to inspire awe, offering insights into cosmology, ritual practice, and the profound human impulse to shape perception and connect with forces beyond the visible. Even now, under modern lights or in quiet museum displays, the pyramid retains its mysterious power. Shadows fall differently depending on the time of day, the angle of observation, and the surrounding environment, creating subtle, shifting stories that invite contemplation. Scholars continue to study its angles, hieroglyphs, and materials, while artists and enthusiasts marvel at its craftsmanship. The miniature pyramid's ability to manipulate perception, to transform light into narrative, and to compress cosmic symbolism into a human-scaled object ensures its status as one of the most enigmatic and captivating artifacts of ancient Egypt. It stands as a reminder that the smallest objects can hold immense significance, that light and shadow are tools of expression as much as stone and pigment, and that human creativity, devotion, and imagination can transcend scale, time, and mortality. The pyramid that moved shadows, in its quiet elegance, continues to move the imagination, casting both literal and metaphorical shadows that stretch across centuries, inviting each observer to consider the interplay between permanence and ephemerality, between the tangible and the transcendent, and between human effort and cosmic order. The axe that shattered silence. In the misty hills of Hallstatt, a land steeped in Iron Age memory, and echoing with the faint murmurs of long-gone settlements, archaeologists unearthed an artifact that defied expectations, known today as the axe that shattered silence. This bronze ritual axe is far more than a tool of woodcutting or warfare. It is a conduit of sound, ceremony, and hidden history. Unlike ordinary axes whose edges are meant to fell trees or strike enemies, this artifact was created to resonate, to command attention, and to punctuate moments of significance in ways that ordinary human speech and noise could not. The axe is modest in size, designed to be wielded with one hand, yet every inch of it communicates careful planning and artistic intent. The blade, forged from bronze with remarkable metallurgical skill, glimmers with a faint, almost ethereal sheen that seems to shift under sunlight or torchlight. Its surface bears intricate motifs, etched by a steady hand, depicting swirls, concentric circles, and abstract representations of sound waves or vibration patterns. These designs are not merely decorative, they speak of a culture attuned to the forces of nature, resonance, and ritualized communication. Its haft is equally remarkable. Constructed from dense, well-aged wood, reinforced with bronze fittings, the axe handle appears almost ceremonial, perfectly balanced for ritual performance rather than physical labor. Small notches along its length suggest a dual purpose. They may have served as finger guides for precise movements, or perhaps acted as acoustic amplifiers, enhancing the vibrations created when the axe struck a surface. Scholars have theorized that the axe was intended to interact with specific materials, stone, bronze, or ceremonial altars, in ways that would maximize resonance, producing deep, echoing sounds that carried across ritual spaces or communal gatherings. The origins of the axe trace back to the Hallstatt culture, a Celtic-associated civilization flourishing in Central Europe during the early Iron Age. While Hallstatt is renowned for its salt mines and burial mounds, this axe points to a more subtle, profound aspect of their spiritual life: sound, rhythm, and ceremonial performance. In a world before amplification, the capacity to command attention, mark significant transitions, or communicate over distance relied upon artifacts capable of producing loud, resonant, and penetrating sounds. This axe, with its carefully calculated mass, metallurgy, and design, exemplifies such a purpose. The blade itself exhibits signs of ritual use rather than utilitarian wear. Unlike functional axes, it bears minimal nicks or damage. Instead, the edge has been meticulously maintained, suggesting its strikes were deliberate, precise, and ceremonial. Microanalysis of the bronze reveals traces of organic substances, resins, oils, or pigments that may have been applied during rituals, both to protect the metal and to imbue it with symbolic or spiritual significance. Perhaps these substances enhanced resonance, or perhaps they were part of offerings to deities or ancestral spirits, further linking the axe to sacred practice. Acoustic testing of replicas has revealed extraordinary properties. When the blade strikes a wooden or stone surface at the correct angle, it produces a sound that carries farther than expected for its size. The sound is rich, deep, and vibrating, capable of filling enclosed spaces or echoing across open landscapes. Archaeologists and experimental historians speculate that during ceremonies, multiple axes, drums, or other resonant objects may have been used in tandem, creating orchestrated soundscapes that enhanced ritual experience, marked calendrical events, or summoned the presence of divine forces. In this context, the axe was not merely an instrument, it was a voice, a shaper of space, and a marker of sacred time. The axe's iconography hints at a cosmological dimension. The concentric circles etched along the blade may represent celestial cycles, the sun, moon, and stars, or they could symbolize the cyclical nature of life, death, and renewal, a theme pervasive in Hallstatt burial practices. Other motifs suggest waves of sound or energy radiating outward, echoing the axe's literal function of producing vibration. These visual cues align with a broader understanding of Iron Age European belief systems, which often fused natural forces, ancestral veneration, and cosmic order into everyday life and ceremonial practice. In burial contexts, similar axes have been found alongside elite individuals, indicating status, power, or religious authority. The ritual axe may have functioned as a symbol of office or spiritual capability, granting the wielder the power to bridge worlds, the living and the dead, the temporal and the divine. In this way, the axe that shattered silence was not just an instrument, it was an emblem of authority, a tool of memory, and a repository of cultural knowledge, connecting human action with the metaphysical. Scholars also note the axe's placement within its original environment. It was found in proximity to ceremonial mounds, salt deposits, and ritual deposits, suggesting that sound played a role in funerary rites, offerings to chthonic deities, or community gatherings. Its strikes may have been intended to signal the start of a rite, punctuate a moment of transformation, or even to interact with natural acoustics, amplifying human intention through echoes that resonated across valleys and hills. The axe, therefore, served not merely as an instrument, but as an intermediary between human intent and the environment itself. The meticulous balance of the axe, coupled with its acoustic properties, hints at experimentation and iterative design. The artisans who created it understood not only metallurgy and woodworking, but also physics and acoustics. By adjusting weight distribution, blade curvature, and material density, they achieved a tool capable of producing controlled, harmonious vibrations. This demonstrates a level of technical and artistic sophistication rarely acknowledged in discussions of early European cultures. It reminds us that ingenuity is not a product of modernity alone. It has deep roots in human history, where function and ritual coalesced seamlessly. Beyond its physical and acoustic attributes, the axe carries an emotional resonance. Imagine the scenes in which it was used: a dimly lit chamber within a burial mound, the flicker of torchlight casting shadows on walls, priests or shamans lifting the axe and striking ceremonial stones. Each resounding clang would reverberate through the chamber, a sound of authority, reverence, and communication that transcended words. Perhaps these sounds were believed to awaken ancestral spirits, summon deities, or convey messages across the thin veil between worlds. Each strike was both act and symbol, performance and prayer, sound and spirit. The discovery of the axe that shattered silence also raises questions about the broader Hallstatt understanding of ritual, space, and sensory experience. Sound, it seems, was as vital to ritual as imagery, architecture, or material wealth. By using bronze and precise design, these people transformed an object into a sonic amplifier, allowing vibrations to extend the reach of human action into the unseen. This challenges modern notions of what constitutes ritual power, suggesting that auditory phenomena, like shadow or light in other cultures, played a central role in mediating sacred experience. Even now, the axe's presence commands attention. In museum displays, it exudes quiet authority. Visitors sense its latent power, the promise of sound embedded within bronze and wood, the echoes of ceremonies long gone. Scholars continue to study its metallurgy, proportions, and iconography, while musicians and experimental archaeologists recreate its strikes, exploring the haunting resonance that first inspired awe in Iron Age participants. The axe that shattered silence stands as a testament to the Hallstatt people's ingenuity, artistry, and spiritual depth. It demonstrates that even a simple object, a small handheld bronze axe, can carry immense symbolic, sonic, and cultural weight. Its ability to manipulate sound, to bridge human action with environmental resonance, and to serve as both ritual instrument and emblem of authority ensures its place among history's most intriguing artifacts. The axe invites modern observers to reflect on the power of sound, the meaning imbued in crafted objects, and the ways in which human creativity can shape perception, ceremony, and memory. As light shifts across the display case, subtle reflections dance along its polished surfaces, shadows stretch and bend across the room. reminding all who gaze upon it that even silence can be shattered, and even the smallest tool can wield profound influence over space, perception, and time. The bronze sings once more, in the mind if not in reality, a lingering reminder that the echoes of ritual, devotion, and artistry persist far beyond their creators, resonating across centuries and inviting the curious to listen, to wonder, and to imagine the ceremonies that gave life to this extraordinary object. The statue that turned at midnight. In the shadowed corridors of Angkor, where moss and vine creep silently over centuries-old sandstone, there exists a statue that has fascinated scholars, travelers, and the local population alike. Known today as the statue that turned at midnight, this stone guardian stands as a sentinel over forgotten pathways and hidden chambers, an artifact whose very presence seems alive with intention and subtle, almost imperceptible motion. Carved from dense, weathered stone, the statue embodies the artistry and spiritual complexity of the Khmer civilization, reflecting both their architectural mastery and their deep cosmological beliefs. The figure itself is imposing yet precise, a guardian poised in eternal vigilance. Its posture suggests readiness and alertness, shoulders squared, one foot slightly forward, and hands arranged in a manner that implies both blessing and protection. Fine details reveal an unparalleled understanding of human and divine anatomy. Facial features are carefully modeled, high cheekbones, almond-shaped eyes, and a faint, enigmatic smile that seems to shift when viewed from different angles. Intricate carvings on the headdress, robes, and base of the statue suggest a confluence of religious symbolism, mythological motifs, and geometric precision, all meticulously chosen to communicate sacred authority and protective power. Local legend tells of the statue's most extraordinary property, the ability to rotate, ever so subtly, when the moon reaches its zenith at midnight. Scholars remain divided on whether this movement is optical illusion, subtle seismic shifts, or a deliberate ancient mechanism embedded within the base. Observers over decades have noted that during certain nights, the shadow of the statue shifts unnaturally, the shoulders appear to pivot, and the gaze seems to sweep across the temple grounds, as though watching, assessing, and guarding. This phenomenon has given rise to names like the Midnight Sentinel and the Turning Guardian, and it is said that those who witness the motion firsthand feel a profound, almost spiritual sense of the statue's sentience. The statue's creation likely involved a combination of spiritual ritual, technical knowledge, and artistic mastery. Khmer artisans were renowned for their precision in sculpting sandstone and for integrating their work seamlessly into the broader architecture of Angkorian temples. It is believed that this statue was not merely decorative, but served a ritualistic purpose, marking sacred space, protecting the temple from spiritual and physical threats, and acting as a conduit between the human and the divine. Carvings on the base suggest that the statue was intended to align with solar and lunar cycles, hinting at a sophisticated understanding of celestial events and their influence on earthly rituals. Close examination reveals that the statue's base is not solid stone, but a complex assembly of interlocking slabs, wedges, and pivots. Some archaeologists hypothesize that Khmer engineers designed a hidden rotational mechanism, activated by minute shifts in weight or temperature, to allow the statue to pivot imperceptibly over time. This idea aligns with a broader understanding of Angkorian ingenuity, where hydraulic systems, astronomical alignments, and precise stonework demonstrate a remarkable integration of science, religion, and art. The statue may have been part of a larger ritual choreography, where movement, shadow, and reflection played crucial roles in temple ceremonies. The placement of the statue within its temple complex is equally significant. Positioned at the intersection of corridors leading to inner sanctuaries and hidden chambers, it appears to oversee both the sacred rituals within and the approach of visitors from outside. This spatial arrangement is deliberate, reinforcing the guardian's role as an intermediary between the profane and the sacred. Ancient texts and inscriptions hint that the statue was associated with protective deities and ancestral spirits, tasked with ensuring that only the worthy could enter the inner sanctum while warding off malevolent forces. Legends surrounding the statue extend beyond its movement. Local folklore tells of monks and temple custodians who, upon witnessing the guardian turn, interpreted it as a message, warnings of impending danger, confirmations of divine favor, or omens relating to harvests and warfare. Some stories suggest that the statue could rotate more dramatically during times of spiritual unrest, such as when temple grounds were threatened by foreign invaders or local unrest. While these accounts are difficult to verify, they illustrate the deep cultural resonance the statue held, linking physical space, spiritual authority, and temporal events in a single mesmerizing artifact. Artistic analysis of the statue reveals layers of symbolic intent. Every line and curve seems purposeful. The flowing robes mimic the motion of water, symbolizing purification and continuity. The headdress features lotus petals and celestial motifs, representing enlightenment, protection, and cosmic harmony. and the eyes, though stone, are inlaid with reflective minerals that catch moonlight, giving the impression of watching even in darkness. This careful attention to visual perception enhances the statue's mystical aura, making its subtle nocturnal movement appear almost sentient. Beyond artistry and engineering, the statue embodies a philosophical concept central to Khmer culture: the inseparability of time, space, and sacred presence. Its turning at midnight is more than physical. It represents a symbolic realignment of spiritual energies, a reminder of the cyclical nature of life, death, and divine oversight. The statue stands as both witness and participant in temple rituals, a silent actor whose shifts in position correspond with unseen cosmic rhythms, merging human craftsmanship with natural and celestial forces. Historical research suggests that the statue may have been commissioned during the reign of a Khmer king seeking to reinforce religious authority and temple prestige. Such statues often accompanied inscriptions and reliefs describing the king's devotion, victories, and alignment with divine will. In this context, the turning motion could serve both symbolic and practical purposes, demonstrating the king's favor with the gods, inspiring awe in visitors, and reinforcing the temple as a locus of spiritual power. It becomes clear that the statue that turned at midnight was never meant to be static or purely ornamental. It was intended as a living, interactive participant in the temple's spiritual landscape. Modern investigations using 3D scanning, infrared analysis, and acoustic modeling have attempted to understand the statue's rotational phenomenon. Researchers consider possibilities ranging from slow, thermally induced movement, subtle tectonic shifts, to ingenious mechanical design hidden in the stone. Despite decades of study, no definitive explanation has emerged, maintaining the statue's aura of mystery. Visitors continue to report a sense of sentience, the feeling that the guardian watches, judges, and protects, silently narrating stories of generations long gone. The statue's enduring power lies not only in its physical presence, but also in the cultural memory it embodies. Centuries of temple worship, local storytelling, and scholarly attention have layered meaning upon meaning, creating a living tapestry of interpretation. For the modern observer, the statue challenges assumptions about inanimate objects, suggesting that human intention, artistry, and belief can imbue stone with the appearance of life. It reminds us that across time, civilizations have sought to communicate, protect, and inspire, not just through words or texts, but through objects that bridge the tangible and the mystical. Standing before the statue that turned at midnight, one senses the intersection of art, engineering, ritual, and myth. The subtle shift in shadow, the reflected glimmer of moonlight, the delicate balance of form and posture, all combine to evoke a feeling of presence that transcends stone. Its enduring mystery invites contemplation, urging the viewer to reflect on the relationship between the visible and invisible, the static and dynamic, the human and divine. The statue is both witness and actor, a sentinel of history whose silent rotations speak to those who listen carefully enough. In this way, the stone guardian of Angkor continues its quiet vigilance. It holds the memory of rituals, kings, priests, and worshippers. It interacts with the cycles of the moon and stars. It embodies craftsmanship, spiritual insight, and cosmic awareness. To encounter this statue is to engage with centuries of cultural sophistication, to stand in a space where stone becomes storytelling, guardianship, and ritual authority all at once. Though its movements are subtle, they ripple outward in imagination, connecting past to present, human to divine, silence to sound, and stillness to motion. The statue does not merely exist, it watches, it shifts, it remembers, and it invites all who approach to ponder the mysteries encoded in stone, moonlight, and centuries of devoted observation. Thank you for joining us on this journey through history's most enigmatic relics. If you enjoyed exploring these mysteries, please like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. Until next time, keep wondering and stay curious.